Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michael Van Eck. Michael Van Eck was born on August 14, 1987, in a city that was once a hub for gold miners. He was the only son among four sisters, Natasha, Michelle, Bianca, and Hriana, and grew up in a close-knit family. His parents were caring and provided a comfortable life for their children. Michael's father worked hard to establish his own business, while his mother created a nurturing environment at home that encouraged the growth and development of her children. Michael was a sociable and kind person who excelled in school and sports, earning a black belt in karate that gave him confidence. After completing his education, Michael trained as an electrician, a highly sought-after profession that offered good earnings and job prospects. He worked at the Beatrix mine in the small town of Unison, where he was employed at mine number 4. Not content to rest on his laurels, Michael continued his education to become an engineer. In 2011, Michael, then 23 years old, joined a dating site to cope with a recent breakup and expand his social circle. It seemed like a stroke of luck when he came across the profile of a sweet and smiling young woman that caught his eye. During the ongoing conversation, the man discovered that they shared common interests. Similar to him, she disliked loud parties and excessive drinking, and sought a genuine, meaningful relationship and a strong family foundation. Michael was pleasantly surprised to find a compatible match online. Living with his parents at the time, he shared his excitement and concerns with his mother. On April 2nd, he confided in her about his upcoming date and made an effort to prepare and make a good impression. He withdrew his first paycheck of 1,000 Rand from his account. The only thing that gave him pause was the unusual location his online friend had chosen for their first meeting, the city cemetery. To avoid worrying his parents, he kept this detail to himself. Around 9 p.m. that evening, Michael bid farewell to his family and left the house. He drove to the designated location in his silver Pajero 2007, a gift from his parents for his 18th birthday. As expected, she was running a bit late, but her appearance was striking. She from the internet arrived dressed in a pristine white dress and smiled warmly. The conversation flowed easily, and afterwards, she suggested continuing the evening elsewhere in the cemetery. She invited him to a secluded area with a blanket spread out on the grass, accompanied by a basket of fruit and wine. Michael and his friends had just finished their drinks when his beautiful companion suddenly kissed him. At first, the kiss was pleasant, but it quickly turned into a painful and horrific experience. Unbeknownst to Michael, this kiss was the beginning of a sinister plot. Jane van Heerden was born in 1991 to parents who were struggling in their marriage. When her mother discovered she was pregnant, they decided to put their divorce on hold and try to work through their issues. However, their efforts were unsuccessful, and the situation at home continued to deteriorate. Unfortunately for Jane, her mother resented her presence, seeing her as a constant reminder of her unhappy marriage. Even after the divorce, Jane's mother held on to her negative feelings, making it difficult for Jane to feel loved and accepted. Jane's behavioral issues and cold demeanor towards her children persisted even after her marriage ended. As a result, her 3 children felt isolated and misunderstood, with Jane, in particular, struggling the most. From a young age, she became withdrawn and sullen, displaying psychological problems. Her behavior became increasingly disturbing, as she frequently talked about death and created confusing artwork. She also developed an imaginary friend named Azael. Her grandparents, concerned about her well-being, suspected she might be possessed and took her to church for an exorcism. During the ritual, Jane's body convulsed, which was likely due to her fear of crowds and the intense anxiety she felt during the ordeal, possibly triggering an epileptic seizure. The traumatic experience had a lasting impact on her memory, causing her to develop a deep-seated fear of the dark. This phobia was further exacerbated by her mother's frightening statement that toys come to life at night, leading Chain to take drastic measures to protect herself, such as taping her doll's eyes shut and restraining them with shoelaces. Chain's mental condition took a turn for the worse as she entered preteen years. At 10 years old, she had a disturbing episode where she threatened a family guest with a knife while visiting her father. This incident prompted her family to seek professional help, and she was evaluated by a specialist who prescribed sedatives. The medication had a positive impact on her mood and overall well-being for a time. During a period of calm, Chain's father made a conscious effort to spend more time with her, often picking her up from school and taking her on hunting trips. He hoped that by sharing his hobby, he could provide her with the attention and connection she craved. Chain found enjoyment in her father's activities, particularly in tasks like butchering and skinning animals. However, this fascination led her to begin collecting and bringing home the carcasses of small animals, starting with rats and birds, and escalating to cats and dogs. She also took to cutting flesh and occasionally self-inflicted injuries. As it turned out, around age 12, Chain had befriended a man who introduced her to substance use and took advantage of her vulnerability. Fortunately, she ended the toxic relationship on her own, although her sisters had initially kept the situation hidden from their parents. Chain's emotional state was negatively affected by her chaotic childhood. At the age of 15, her mother left for New Zealand, where she started a new relationship and never returned to care for her children. Chain and her siblings were left in the care of their father and stepmother, who did their best to provide for them, but struggled to understand the depth of Chain's emotional issues. Her family initially attributed her behavior to typical teenage struggles. However, her situation took a turn for the worse when she became involved with a 22-year-old man who was interested in Satanism, occultism, and voodoo cults. He had a profound influence on Chain, but his cruel nature often left her feeling belittled and suppressed. Fortunately, Chain's life began to turn around with the support of her family and therapy. By the time she turned 17, she had distanced herself from the negative influences in her life, graduated from high school, and enrolled in college to study art and graphic design. As she lost interest in Satanism and stopped using substances that were harming her, her emotional well-being began to improve. Chain thrived in her studies and landed a job in her field, where she received support from both her colleagues and management. She discovered a natural talent for visual arts, earning her respect and recognition in her profession. At the same time, she began a romantic relationship with a man named Warren. To those outside her inner circle, Chain's life seemed perfectly ordinary. Her family and close friends avoided discussing her past, hoping that the difficult times were behind her. However, it was unclear what was happening beneath the surface. It's possible that her inner struggles were simply waiting to resurface. Her father, in particular, was overjoyed for Chain, believing she had finally found stability and would soon get married. However, his expectations were not fulfilled. A surprising challenge arose from Warren's friend Roy, a self-proclaimed sensitive person. Although Chain came across as kind and friendly, Roy detected something off-putting and even evil about her. He suspected that Chain might be unfaithful to his friend, so he decided to confront her about it. However, instead of answering his question, Chain became enraged and spat in his face, telling him to stop asking her ridiculous questions. At a party, Chain noticed Martin, a 24-year-old from a well-respected family. Despite his calm and sociable nature, rumors surrounded him. Born into a privileged family, Martin had a happy childhood, excelling academically and behaving well. However, at 6, he began experiencing hallucinations, convinced by an entity that he possessed incredible strength. As he grew older, his mental health declined, and his behavior changed due to struggles at school and home. At 14, Martin was hospitalized for psychiatric treatment and diagnosed with schizophrenia. Unfortunately, standard treatments were ineffective. His financially secure family dedicated themselves to finding alternative medications, eventually discovering the necessary drugs to control his condition, except for occasional aggressive outbursts. Martin was deeply affected by witnessing a stray cat being attacked by dogs. Instead of feeling revulsion or sympathy, he chose to hide the cat's body and observe it. This disturbing incident marked the beginning of his animal torture. He eventually dropped out of school and started working with his father in the carpentry shop, aspiring to follow in his family's footsteps. As he worked, his condition showed signs of improvement, and he lost the desire to harm animals. Feeling in control, he made the decision to stop taking his medication, despite concerns from those around him. However, this decision ultimately proved to be a grave mistake. Martin's mental state gradually declined, and it was during this time that he met Jane. Their relationship seemed happy and normal to outsiders, and their parents were initially pleased with their union. But neither set of parents was aware of the dark history of their children, and their relationship ultimately led to devastating consequences. Initially, they was outgoing and social, attending parties and interacting with others. However, acquaintances began to notice cuts on their hands, which they jokingly attributed to intimate experiments. Over time, they became increasingly reclusive and developed an interest in dark and occult practices, including Satanism and voodoo cults. They also became fascinated with notorious serial killers. In February 2011, Martin posted a photo of himself and Jane on social media, with the caption, "Killers," accompanied by a cryptic emoji. At the time, no one suspected that the post was anything more than a joke. Meanwhile, Martin asked Jane's father for permission to marry her, which was met with enthusiasm. However, unbeknownst to those around them, they harbored a sinister secret. Instead of dreaming of a future together, they fantasized about ending their lives in a violent manner. These dark fantasies eventually evolved into a twisted plan to torture and kill homeless individuals. They even practiced their twisted intentions on animals, due to unable to find a suitable human victim to carry out their heinous plan. Jane created a profile on a dating site, which caught the attention of a young man named Michael Van Eck. Jane and her partner, Martin, targeted Michael for their sinister plans. They began flirting with Michael online, and after a few days, Jane suggested they meet in person. Despite the unusual location, Michael agreed to the meeting. Jane and Martin carefully planned the encounter, considering every detail, including their attire and the means to commit a crime. Jane approached the meeting prepared, while Martin hid behind tombstones, waiting for a signal. When Jane kissed Michael, it was the agreed-upon signal for Martin to attack. He struck Michael with a knife from behind, but Michael unexpectedly resisted. Jane intervened, and together they inflicted around 30 knife wounds on Michael. As Michael begged for an end to his suffering, Martin slit his throat, ultimately killing him. The perpetrators then dragged the body onto a blanket and began to carry out their plan. They cut off the victim's legs at the knee and severed his head. The dismembered body parts were placed in bags. The perpetrators attempted to bury the body at the site, but they encountered a problem that they had no shovels. As a result, they were forced to dig a shallow grave using only their hands and knives. After managing to bury the body only halfway, the perpetrators left the scene, taking the severed body parts with them. They used the victim's vehicle to make their getaway, with Martin initially driving, but later handing over control to his accomplice. However, the adrenaline rush from their crime made it difficult for them to focus on the road. Once they arrived home, they stored the bags containing the body parts in the refrigerator, treating them like ordinary groceries. After Martin had somewhat composed himself, he got into the victim's car and drove it to a high-crime neighborhood, hoping that it would be stolen. He left the car unlocked with the keys in the ignition to make it an easy target. A cemetery worker noticed bloody stains and torn clothing in the bushes near the grave. After alerting his supervisor, they called the authorities to report the gruesome find. The police were immediately notified, and an investigation was launched. Meanwhile, Michael Van Eck's parents were frantic with worry. Their son had been unreachable since the previous evening, which was unusual, even if he had stayed overnight with his internet girlfriend. When Michael failed to show up for work, his employer called his parents to ask about his absence. Around the same time, police received a report about an abandoned car with blood stains on the trunk. The vehicle was identified as belonging to Michael Van Eck through a database search. Further investigation revealed that the car had been parked at the cemetery for an extended period. With this new information, police officers visited the Van Eck residence, where they confirmed their suspicions. Michael's mother had been searching for him since the previous day. The officers then asked her to come to the cemetery, where forensic experts and search dogs were working to locate missing body parts. The investigation revealed that the victim's mother identified her son's body through distinctive burn marks he had sustained in childhood. The autopsy confirmed that the victim had suffered multiple knife wounds and showed signs of a struggle. The body had been dismembered after death, which suggested that the perpetrators had some level of expertise in this area. The number and nature of the wounds, as well as the strength required to subdue the victim, indicated that multiple attackers were involved. DNA testing later confirmed the identity of the victim as 23-year-old Michael Van Eck. During the investigation, police seized the victim's cell phone and computer, which revealed that the last person he had communicated with was Cheyne Van Heerden. According to their messages, she had invited him to meet at the cemetery on the night of his death. Detectives brought Cheyne in for questioning, and she arrived with her boyfriend, Martin. Both were interviewed separately and eventually confessed to being involved in the victim's murder. Upon learning of the incident, Cheyne's father rushed to the station, where he was shocked to hear the accusations against his daughter. When he asked her if the allegations were true, Cheyne calmly confirmed her involvement and stated that she would willingly do it again. She claimed that she had fantasized about committing such a crime ever since she started hunting with her father. This cruel confession shocked not only her father but also everyone present. As the case gained public attention, Cheyne's boyfriend, Martin, also showed no remorse. Instead, he seemed to enjoy the public scrutiny and posed for cameras. It became clear that neither Cheyne nor Martin felt any regret for their actions. Investigations revealed that they had planned to take their own lives if caught, but Martin's changed his mind, and Cheyne followed suit. They wanted to live a life of notoriety, embracing their dark impulses. A search of their apartment revealed a disturbing environment. The walls were adorned with distorted portraits of Cheyne, depicting her without eyes, mouth, or ears. The rooms also contained ritual items, animal scalps, knives, and other objects of unclear purpose. Police found the deceased young man's belongings, including his glasses and wallet, which Martins later confessed they had taken to prepare their next crime. The most disturbing discovery was made in the refrigerator, where police found Michael's severed head with his mouth sewn shut. It is believed that the perpetrators intended to use his head as a ritualistic bowl. The victim's eyes and ears were found in separate containers. Additionally, the victim's hand and leg were discovered buried near the murderer's home, alongside the remains of various animals. The perpetrator's diary revealed horrific thoughts and plans for future crimes. The evidence collected during the investigation made it clear that the perpetrators had planned to commit multiple crimes, and that the process of taking lives and mutilating bodies brought them immense pleasure. Martin and Cheyne underwent multiple evaluations to assess their mental competence. The commission confirmed that they were aware of their actions and understood the consequences. In November 2011, Cheyne's trial took place. Despite this being her first offense, she was treated as a serial offender. She openly expressed her desire to repeat her actions and told the court that she understood she should feel shame or remorse, but couldn't. She could only comprehend the severity of her actions through societal standards and the reactions of others. Psychiatrists diagnosed Chain with psychopathic and antisocial disorders, which made her more dangerous than her boyfriend. However, she was skilled at hiding her true nature. Throughout the sentencing, Chain remained impassive. She was found guilty and sentenced to 35 years in prison without the possibility of parole, 20 years for taking a life and an additional 15 years for robbery and dismemberment. Martin defended himself in court, claiming he didn't remember the events until he was in jail. He admitted to studying Satanism and occultism, and said his relationship with Chain led them to commit the crime. He apologized to the victim's parents, but his words seemed insincere. He was found guilty and sentenced to 35 years in prison, with a chance for parole after serving half his sentence. Even in prison, Martin expressed his passion for Chain in letters, calling her a dark goddess. However, Chain eventually ended the relationship, feeling they had grown apart. While incarcerated, Chain proved to be a model prisoner, using her time to teach art and theology to her fellow inmates. In contrast, Martin, while also in prison, gained a small group of admirers who were carefully monitored by police to prevent them from copying his crimes. During his imprisonment, Martin's focused on personal growth, completing his education through correspondence courses and undergoing therapy. Their stories serve as a warning that ordinary individuals can hide dark secrets. Michael, a kind and compassionate person, was manipulated by two individuals with twisted motivations. This tragic event emphasizes the importance of being cautious about the people we surround ourselves with, as their influence can have a profound and lasting impact on our lives. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Banaz Mahmud. Banaz Mahmud was born on December 16, 1985 in Iraq. She comes from an Iraqi Kurdish family with strong religious traditions. Her parents, Mahmud Babakar Mahmud and his wife, had 6 children, 1 son, Bahman, and 5 daughters, Baza, Beel, Han, Jaban, and Banaz. They lived in a rural tribal area in Iraqi Kurdistan, adhering to traditional values, especially regarding women's roles. In 1995, when Banaz was 10 years old, her family moved to the UK. However, this change in location did not alter their deeply held religious and traditional views. Despite being in a more liberal European country, the family continued to reject modern opinion and lived within their tight-knit religious community. At 17, Banaz was forced into a marriage with a man 10 years her senior, who had recently arrived from Iraq. He did not speak English and lacked basic literacy skills. Banaz having met her future husband only 3 times before the wedding. Banaz, described as a girl with brown eyes, long dark hair, and a kind smile, followed tradition and moved into her new husband's home, despite him being a stranger to her. From the start, Banaz suffered physical and emotional abuse at the hands of her husband. Despite having lived in the UK and being aware of her rights, she was trapped in a cycle of violence. She tried to leave her husband multiple times, but her family forced her to return, as it was considered a disgrace for the entire Mahmud family. With no support from her relatives, Banaz turned to the police twice, but they failed to take action, leaving her vulnerable to further abuse. In July 2005, after 2 years of marriage, Banaz finally escaped her husband's house and returned to her parents' home. After leaving her husband, Banaz felt a sense of freedom. She met Ramith Soleimani, and they fell deeply in love. However, they had to keep their relationship a secret. They would only communicate twice a day, exchanging messages in the morning and evening. Ramith was unlike the men surrounding Banaz, as he was calm, wise, and courteous. He treated she with great respect and kindness, instantly winning her heart. Before long, they began envisioning a future together, discussing wedding plans and a happy family life. They even chose names for their potential children. These joyful dreams brought Banaz happiness and gave her the strength to cope with the hatred and aggression from her family. In early October 2005, Banaz was walking down the street when she noticed a car following her. She recognized the people inside as Kurdish migrants sent by her father. Knowing her family's history, Banaz became terrified for her safety. On October 10, 2005, Banaz visited the police station again. During a 2-hour conversation, she shared detailed information about her life with her husband, including the physical abuse she suffered, her family's resentment, and the recent surveillance. She told the police that her husband had repeatedly beaten her, and during one incident, he nearly knocked out her tooth because she dared to call him by his first name in public. Banaz had previously informed the police that she feared for her life, but her concerns were ignored. The police failed to investigate her claims, neglecting to interview her family and husband to verify the accuracy of the information. She was told to contact them again if she felt threatened. Banaz and her boyfriend, Hriana, secretly met for about 2 months without being detected. However, in early December 2005, they were spotted by members of her family near a London subway station. This information was immediately reported to her father. That evening, her male relatives gathered at the family home, where they discussed her actions and deemed them unacceptable. Her uncle, Ari Mahmoud, declared that Banaz should be killed to restore the family's honor. Banaz overheard this conversation. Following this, Banaz went to the police again and explained that she had been under surveillance for months. She also told them that her family intended to kill her. She provided a list of 5 family members who were involved in the plot, but the police did not take her seriously. A serious mistake was made, which led to Banaz's disappearance. To uncover her fate, investigators must untangle a complicated network of lies, violence, and disregard for the truth. 2 weeks later, Banaz's father deceives her into visiting a relative's house, promising to discuss her divorce. Upon arrival, he forces her to drink brandy and leaves her alone in a room with the TV on. As she turns around, she sees her father putting on rubber gloves and reaching for a rope. Realizing her life is in danger, Banaz rushes to the front door, but it's locked. To escape, she breaks a window, cutting her hands on the shards. Banaz manages to reach a nearby cafe, where she collapses. Paramedics arrive and take her to the hospital, where the police are called. When Banaz regains consciousness, she contacts Hriana and asks him to come. After being discharged from the hospital, Banaz moves in with Hriana Soleimani. They celebrate the start of 2006 together and are happy. However, by mid-January, the Mahmoud family begins to pressure Banaz to return home, supposedly to mend their relationship and discuss her marriage to Hriana. Banaz trusted her parents and agreed to return to her father's house, believing her mother would protect her if her father became violent. To be safe, Banaz went to the police station again and gave a full statement, including the names of people she thought might harm her. Despite her fears, she returned to her family home. On January 22, 2006, Hriana was attacked by 3 men in the street who tried to force him into a car. He managed to fight back and reported the incident to the police. 2 days later, Hriana and Banaz were due to give a statement at the police station, but Banaz failed to appear. Hriana attempted to reach Banaz Mahmoud, but lost contact with her after she vanished upon returning to her family's residence. Hriana, who had been in constant touch with Banaz, grew increasingly worried and filed a missing persons report with the police. After numerous appeals, the police finally took action. The disappearance of Banaz Mahmoud sparked an investigation led by the Homicide and Serious Crime Directorate, with Chief Inspector Caroline Good at the helm. Initially, it was suspected that Banaz was being held captive in a house within the community. To locate her, Inspector Good organized an extensive search of linked to the Mahmoud family. Banaz's father, uncle, and ex-husband were brought in for questioning as suspects. The police also began searching for 3 other men listed by Banaz in December 2005, Omar Hussein, Muhammad Ali, and Mohammed Hama, all of whom were her cousins. However, when the police searched the neighborhood and tried to question her family members, and the family refused to cooperate with the investigation into her disappearance. Police found no photos of Banaz at her family's home, and her family's complete lack of concern shocked officers. Caroline Good then focused on 30 individuals, all of whom were arrested and questioned. During the investigation, over 20 vehicles and 300 cell phones were seized from those involved. Every person questioned attempted to hinder the investigation, providing conflicting accounts of Banaz's whereabouts. Some claimed to have seen her after she went missing, while others, including her mother, refused to cooperate with the police. Some even suggested she was in hiding. Realizing that no one would cooperate voluntarily, Caroline Good obtained permission to bug the cells of those arrested. At that point, Banaz's father, her uncle, and Mohammed Hama remained in police custody. 2 other men under investigation had managed to escape to Iraq. The detectives were horrified when they received the initial wiretap results. Not only did the 3 arrested men show no remorse, but they also took pleasure in recounting the details of Banaz's death. Their conversations revealed that on January 23rd, the Mahmoud family intentionally left their home, allowing Omar Hussein and Hama to enter. Once inside, they attacked Banaz, subjecting her to a 2-hour ordeal of beatings and violence. As the torture came to an end, Hama wrapped a cord around Banaz's neck and strangled her. When recalling the final moments of Banaz's life, Hama couldn't contain his laughter. However, it was Mohammed Hama's admission of being present when Rameth was threatened that became the turning point in the case. While Hama was being held in a cell awaiting trial, his phone conversations were secretly recorded. Caroline Good listened to these recordings with growing horror as the suspect proudly described the gruesome details of the murder. In the recordings, Hama provided a detailed account of what they did to Banaz. Despite being terrified and vomiting, Banaz remained silent. Hama then wrapped the rope around her neck 3 times, pulling it so tight that it dug into her skin. As he continued to speak with excitement, he placed his feet on her back and pulled and tugged on the rope. Banaz clung to life until her last breath. It took the perpetrators over 30 minutes to kill Banaz. The brutality of the crime was too much for Caroline Good and the detectives, and they couldn't hold back their tears. Banaz's cousin, Dana Amin, 30, was present in the house and helped the perpetrator put Banaz's body in a suitcase. Muhammad Ali then dragged the suitcase out of the house to a waiting car nearby. Hama revealed that a police car drove by, but the officers didn't notice the suitcase, which had hair and an elbow protruding from it. The very people meant to protect Banaz were involved in plotting her murder. They strangled her with a shoelace, stuffed her body into a suitcase, and took it outside of London. Snippets of conversation mentioned a derelict house with a garden in Birmingham. Caroline Good used the information gathered and matched it with the movement data from the arrested suspects' phones to identify the search area. Due to the vastness of the area, the search could have taken a long time. During a conversation with the suspects, one of them suddenly turned to the other and asked if they had put the freezer back where it originally was. This sparked an idea for Caroline Good, now knew what to look for. A police helicopter was deployed to scan the area and spotted a house with a backyard filled with trash, including a white oblong object resembling a freezer that stood out among the black garbage bags. Upon closer inspection of the suspicious house, the officers' suspicions were confirmed. The police officers began digging, but as the hole reached shoulder depth, they were on the verge of giving up, all except Caroline Good. She recalled the words of Mohammed Hama, who had boasted to relatives that he had buried the victim so deep that she would only be found with the help of an informant. Caroline Good convinced the team to extend the search for another day. On the evening of April 28, 2006, their persistence paid off, and the suitcase was finally found. Unfortunately, Banaz's remains were in extremely poor condition, making it necessary to rely on dental records and DNA samples for identification. Her body was discovered folded into a fetal position, hidden in a suitcase and buried beneath a freezer in the garden of a Birmingham house. On May 1, 2006, the suspects were formally charged with the crime. However, they displayed no remorse, convinced that their actions were justified. Mohammed Hama even claimed that the case would not go to trial, as he believed he was simply carrying out an act of retaliation. Meanwhile, Caroline Good faced renewed opposition from the Kurdish diaspora community. Following the discovery of Banaz's remains, numerous individuals came forward to provide alibis for the suspects, claiming that they were in public on the day of the alleged and therefore could not have committed the crime. Approximately 50 individuals were involved or connected to Banaz's death in various capacities. Reflecting on the events, Caroline Good recalled feeling intense anger, disgust, and contempt for the men involved. She noted that 50 men had participated in the murder of one woman, and they took pride in their actions, which they saw as a demonstration of their masculinity. In March 2007, the trial against Mahmoud Babakar Mahmoud, Ari Mahmoud, and Mohammed Hamad began at London Central Criminal Court. Prosecutor Victor Temple described the crime as a cold-blooded and heartless execution that was orchestrated by the victim's father and uncle. In June 2007, a jury delivered finding all three defendants guilty of the charges and ineligible for leniency. The sentences handed down were severe. The father received a life sentence with a minimum of 20 years, the uncle was given life with a 23-year minimum, and cousin Mohammed Hama also received a life sentence with a minimum term of 17 years. Judge Brian Barker was scathing in his delivery of the verdict, stating, "He decided that your so-called family honor needed to be restored, which meant she had to die and her memory erased. This is a heinous and heartless crime. What kind of honor is it when a father prioritizes his social status over the life of his own child?" A mere 4 months after the trio's conviction, London police were informed that Muhammad Ali had been arrested in Iraq for a crime committed against a young boy. Muhammad Ali had taken his own life. Omar Hussein, the last of the 5 perpetrators, had been hiding in rural Iraq, attempting to avoid public detection. However, in December 2009, he was shot in the leg during an altercation with one of his brothers and required medical attention. Upon arriving at the hospital, police were notified and subsequently arrested him. Initially, Omar Hussein denied being in London in 2005, thereby claiming innocence in Banaz's death. But UK Social Security records revealed that he had been receiving refugee benefits during that time, contradicting his statement. The court ultimately sentenced him to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 21 years. Dana Amin was given an 8 years prison sentence for his role in disposing of Banaz Mahmoud's body and hindering the investigation. A recorded interview with Banaz at a police station implicated her family in the crime. Banaz had previously handed in a letter to a police station in South London, naming individuals who threatened to kill her and her boyfriend Rameth. The individuals named in the letter were from Banaz's family and the wider Iraqi Kurdish community. They were angry about her decision to divorce her husband, who treated her poorly. Despite several attempts to leave him, Banaz returned due to family pressure. The police failed to respond properly to Banaz's situation, which ultimately resulted in her death. However, this case prompted significant changes in how honor-related cases are handled. An inquiry into police misconduct was launched after Banaz's death, and an independent commission investigated 9 police officers for their inadequate response to her allegations. 7 officers received reprimands, and 2 were dismissed. It is essential to recognize the tireless efforts of Caroline Good and her team, who successfully located Banaz's body, secured the conviction of her father and uncle, and brought the escaped perpetrators back from Iraq. Banaz was laid to rest at the Merton and Sutton Joint Cemetery in Morden. A memorial service was held in her honor on June 26, 2007, at the MN Auditorium, followed by the installation of a granite memorial headstone at her gravesite. The memorial was attended by a small group of people, including Ramit Soleimani, Caroline Good, and Benaz's two sisters. Notably, Benaz's family did not attend either service. Ramit Soleimani, who had been living in the UK under witness protection, was profoundly affected by Benaz's death. He penned a heartfelt letter expressing his love and grief, describing Benaz as the love of his life and his entire world. Unfortunately, his pain and suffering continued, and in May 2016, 10 years after the tragedy, he took his own life. This was his third attempt to end his life, a devastating consequence of the trauma he had endured. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Paige Bergfeld. Paige Bergfeld was born in Atlanta, Georgia on April 27, 1973, to Frank and Suzanne Bergfeld. She had one sibling, Craig Bergfeld. Paige grew up in Atlanta before relocating to Colorado. In 1995, she married her high school crush, Howard Ron Biegler, who was also her first love. However, their marriage ended due to disagreements about having children. While Paige was ready to start a family, Howard was not interested. Following their divorce, Paige married Rob Dixon, an ambitious businessman, in 1998. Their intense 10-year marriage resulted in 3 children, Jess, Taft, and Cole. June 28, 2007, marked the last time Paige Bergfeld was seen by her loved ones. Earlier that day, Paige had spent part of the afternoon with her ex-husband, Howard Biegler, with whom she had recently rekindled their romance. After a picnic together, they went their separate ways. Around 9 p.m., Biegler called Paige to check in on her, and she assured him she was heading home and would text him once she arrived. However, that text never came. Biegler tried calling her again the next day, but her phone went straight to voicemail, indicating it was either turned off or out of reach. This raised his concerns, and on the third day, he decided to visit her apartment. What he discovered was shocking. Paige's live-in nanny informed him that she had not returned home in 3 days. Biegler immediately alerted Paige's parents and the authorities, sparking a terrifying investigation that would unfold in the days to come. Paige Bergfeld's parents, Frank and Suzanne, were devastated when their beloved daughter went missing. The police suspected foul play in her disappearance, partly because of her parents. Frank described Paige as a devoted mother who would never leave her children. Paige would go to great lengths to care for her kids, even if it meant crawling with broken limbs. Her children were her top priority, and everyone close to her knew it. Paige's brother, Craig Bergfeld, a Seattle-based plastic surgeon specializing in facial reconstruction for kids, left his home to care for Paige's children in Grand Junction, Colorado. He and his wife Claire understood that Paige's primary concern was her kids' safety and well-being, and they made that their top priority too. Seeing that Paige was a devoted and caring mother, the police were convinced that she wouldn't have simply abandoned her children and left town. They believed something must be preventing Paige from being with her kids, and they launched an investigation to uncover the truth. Mesa County Sheriff Matt Hilke began looking into the case, following standard procedure when someone goes missing. Typically, the closest people to the missing person and the last ones to see them are the first to be investigated. So the police invited Howard Biegler for questioning. Biegler was the last person to see Paige before she vanished, raising the question of whether he could have been involved in her disappearance. In an interview, Paige's father confirmed that Ron Biegler was Paige's greatest love. Paige and Ron had shared a passionate romance since high school, and after reuniting over 10 years ago, her father was certain that Biegler would never harm his daughter. Paige Bergfeld's life took a surprising turn. After marrying Rob Dixon in 1998, she fell for his charming personality. However, her father described their pre-marriage relationship as whirlwind-like. Rob's wealth from a successful business initially impressed Paige, but his post-marriage behavior became reckless, marked by extravagant spending and poor investments, ultimately leading to financial ruin. Paige took steps to improve their financial situation by starting a small preschool dance program called Brain Dance. She also began selling kitchen appliances for a company called The Pampered Chef from their home. However, Rob's spending habits canceled out Paige's efforts, causing tension in their marriage. Frank Bergfeld described Rob's unpredictable personality. While Rob could be cheerful, friendly, and lively at times, he would often become mean, condescending, irritable, and short-tempered. Rob Dixon's importance in the police investigation grew after a new discovery. Prior to her divorce, Paige had reported a threat to the police in October 2004. In a 911 call, she said Rob had threatened to kill the kids if she didn't let them stay with him, but the situation was resolved by the time police arrived. A year after the first incident, Paige Bergfeld reported another disturbing altercation to 911. She and her husband Rob had a fight, during which he pushed her to the ground while she was holding their baby, and then punched her in the stomach. This time, the police arrested Rob, but he was released after completing an anger management course. The Mesa County Sheriff's Office questioned Rob Dixon about Paige's disappearance. Rob claimed to have been in Philadelphia on the day she went missing, which was supported by the fact that he had moved there after their divorce. Despite his history of violent behavior towards Paige, Rob had a solid alibi, having been 2,000 miles away from Grand Junction at the time of her disappearance. The police did not release details of their interview with Rob to the public. Paige's father, Frank Bergfeld, realized that even someone with a troubled personality like Rob couldn't have committed murder from such a distance. Although Rob was no longer a suspect, the Bergfeld family still had concerns about him. 3 months prior to her disappearance, Paige posted disturbing content about Rob on an online message board, where she shared that her children would often ask her if their father was going to kill her. In the post, she confided that she could imagine her kids wondering what life would be like if she were actually dead. With both of Paige's ex-husbands possessing solid alibis, the police were forced to broaden their suspect search. However, after investigating those close to Paige Bergfeld, the police were still unable to find a suspect, leaving them to ponder who could be responsible for her disappearance. Ultimately, this led to a stunning revelation about Paige Bergfeld herself. Paige Bergfeld was a devoted mother with a bubbly personality, loved by her family and friends. But behind her happy family scenes, she led a secret double life. In addition to her public roles as a dance teacher and kitchen appliances vendor in Grand Junction, Paige had a hidden online persona. After her disappearance, her family discovered something suspicious on her laptop, which they reported to the police. The subsequent investigation revealed that Paige had a second, lucrative source of income as an expensive escort. Paige used the alias Carrie online and advertised services that went beyond those of a traditional escort, including nude massages and topless encounters, as suggested by provocative internet ads. Paige's family, particularly her sister-in-law Carrie Bergfeld, were shocked to discover her secret life after her disappearance. Although her family was surprised to learn that Paige worked as an escort, they seemed to understand her reasons for doing so. Paige's love for her children drove her to take on a huge responsibility as the breadwinner and provider of her family after her divorce. Her father, Frank Bergfeld, believed that this led her to make a difficult choice. Raising 3 kids alone was a massive task, and Paige was determined to give them the best life possible. Paige's parents, Frank and Susanna Bergfeld, were surprised by the way she chose to achieve her goals. In an interview, Frank said he wished Paige had talked to him about her plans, as he would have been happy to advise her about the potential risks. Although they didn't agree with her profession, Frank and Susanna continued to love and be proud of their daughter without reserve. Craig Bergfeld, Paige's brother, shared their father's view that Paige's profession was driven by her desire to provide for her children. He was aware that her dance school and kitchen appliance sales weren't lucrative enough to cover her $6,000 monthly mortgage, let alone put clothes on the backs of 3 kids. Although he suspected she had another source of income, he never imagined she would be working as an escort. Paige's ex filed for bankruptcy after their divorce. Her brother Craig thought she'd default on the large mortgage soon. But Paige surprised him and his wife C by buying her first home with her 2 jobs teaching dance and selling kitchen equipment. C questioned Paige about her income, and Paige confessed to having worked as a stripper before her marriage. At the age of 21, Paige resided in Dearborn and was employed at the Mile High Saloon, where she earned a substantial income of approximately $400,000 monthly. According to Paige, she ceased working as a stripper upon getting married, though it appears she didn't entirely disconnect from the industry. C surmised that Paige's prior experience as a stripper likely influenced her decision to become an escort. Mesa County Prosecutor D.A. Pete Hinger revealed that, despite 20 years of experience, he had never come across a case like Paige's. He found it astonishing that someone from her socioeconomic background and with her family dynamics would be involved in such a profession. Hinger acknowledged that Paige Bergfeld embodied the ideal of a responsible and devoted mother, making her double life a stunning revelation. This discovery triggered a more in-depth investigation. Paige's parents recognized that uncovering her secrets would be crucial in determining her fate. However, as much as they yearned for closure, they were uncertain if they truly wanted to know the truth. Fluky's search team made progress, but it unsettled the Bergfeld family. Craig wasn't ready to find out what had happened to his sister, clinging to hope she was still alive. Police suspected she wouldn't return, believing it tied to her secret job. The chief district attorney, Dan Rubenstein, took charge of Paige Bergfeld's case and identified a suspect, Lester Ralph Jones, a middle-aged client of Paige's escort services. Although Rubenstein was convinced that Jones was involved in Paige's disappearance, he lacked concrete evidence without her body. A major breakthrough occurred in 2012 when a hiker discovered a body. At first, the police department wasn't certain the body found was Paige's, but after conducting necessary tests, they confirmed it was her by matching her teeth and jaw. What was surprising, however, was that Paige's body had been lying in the exact spot a hiker stumbled upon it, an area already thoroughly searched by Connie Fluky's team, yet nobody had found her. The investigators theorized that the killer must have buried Paige in a grave deep enough to evade the search party. With sufficient evidence, Don Rubenstein was able to bring in Lester Ralph Jones for questioning. Although the police couldn't determine the exact cause of Paige Bergfeld's death, they were convinced it was a violent one. Paige had suffered a fractured jaw, leading investigators to believe her attacker must have severely beaten her. Additionally, remnants of duct tape were found around the corners of her mouth, and it appeared her jaw was fractured just before her death. This discovery made the items found during the search, which Connie Fluky had organized, understandable. The items included pieces of documents scattered along the highway, some of which had Paige's name, while others had her children's names. The investigators assumed that the documents must have been thrown out of the car by Paige's kidnapper as he drove her to the spot where he eventually killed her. However, another possibility was that Paige herself had thrown the documents out of the car as a way of helping people to locate her. Unfortunately, Paige's killer, Lester Ralph Jones, was able to roam free for 5 years after her terrifying murder. Given his bad reputation, it was easy to believe that he was responsible for Paige Bergfeld's death. Don Rubenstein gathered sufficient evidence against Lester Ralph Jones during the investigation. The police discovered Paige's car on the highway, burned in a fire that was believed to have been intentionally started in the passenger seat, likely to destroy DNA samples or any incriminating evidence. Notably, the driver's seat had been adjusted to fit a taller person. Although Ralph Jones denied any knowledge of Paige's burned car during interrogation, It was found just a short distance from his workshop. Given his criminal history, including a prior felony conviction, Ralph Jones's testimony was not credible. Furthermore, a critical piece of evidence implicated him. He had contacted Paige Bergfeld using a burner phone on the day of her disappearance. Despite his denial of purchasing the phone, a CCTV recording showed him doing so. Ralph Jones frequently used Paige's escort services, unaware that he was a ruthless killer. However, it was a conversation with local Sheriff Sergeant Art Smith that ultimately led to his downfall. The sheriff had confiscated 2 of Jones's vehicles, prompting an unexpected and shocking response from Ralph. His reaction was that of a man consumed by guilt. When Sergeant Smith inquired about the cars, Jones casually asked where he would bury a body. This cryptic comment, combined with other evidence, provided the crucial breakthrough the police needed. 7 years after Paige Bergfeld's disappearance, in November 2014, Lester Ralph Jones was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and kidnapping. According to the arresting officers, Jones had been expecting the arrest and showed no signs of surprise. He did not ask any questions, instead calmly turning around and placing his hands behind his back. His bail was set at $2 million. In 2016, Ralph Jones stood trial, and the jury determined that although the evidence against him was circumstantial, it was sufficient to convict him. 9 years after Paige vanished, the jury delivered a guilty verdict in December 2016, finding Ralph Jones responsible for her murder and kidnapping. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Emmett Corrigan. Ashley Harmon, a bright and energetic person, became a caretaker for her 5 siblings after her parents' divorce at age 9. Her strong faith as a devout Mormon gave her strength and comfort in tough times, helping her overcome obstacles with determination and courage. In 2003, Ashley, a human development major, met Emmett Corrigan, a philosophy student, while attending Utah State. Like Ashley, Emmett's parents divorced when he was 10, and he had a tough time coping with the aftermath. However, he eventually found comfort in the Mormon faith. Although Emmett wasn't born into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, he converted to the church at 17 in a ceremony attended by his family and friends. Ashley initially thought Emmett was cute, and he felt the same way about her. Emmett was impressed by Ashley's intelligence and was immediately smitten with her from the moment they met. In fact, he confided in his closest friends that he knew Ashley was the one he wanted to marry. Emmett proposed to Ashley at Christmas 2008, and she happily accepted. They married in a Mormon temple, surrounded by shared beliefs. Overjoyed, they started their new life, finding stability and happiness in their union. In Mormonism, marriage is sacred and eternal, lasting beyond death, with divorce only allowed in extreme cases. Ashley and Emmett welcomed twin daughters in 2005, feeling overjoyed and thrilled to experience parenthood. While attending Utah State University, they balanced childcare and education, relying on faith and love to overcome challenges. Emmett graduated from Utah State University with honors in 2009, attended law school and passed the bar, becoming a bankruptcy attorney. Meanwhile, Ashley stayed home to care for their 4 kids, managing the household while Emmett built his career. Behind closed doors, their seemingly perfect life hid secrets. In August 2010, Emmett faced increasing pressure to provide for his family of 4 young children, all under the age of 5, as the financial burden became overwhelming. To improve his financial situation, Emmett decided to establish his own criminal defense law firm. A friend introduced him to Candy Hall, a reputable paralegal with prior experience working for a criminal attorney. Following a successful lunch meeting, Emmett hired Candy as an assistant for his criminal defense firm. Candy Hall's husband was not in the story. It was Robert Hall, the Emmett, who was a great dad and worker. When his wife, Ashley, got a job, he was thrilled. But as his business and family responsibilities grew, Ashley noticed a strain on their marriage. Robert coped with the pressure by working out excessively, often at inconvenient times, leaving Ashley to care for their 4 kids alone. On January 15, 2011, Ashley and Emmett had their fifth child, a son, despite their growing distance. However, Emmett's behavior towards their newborn was different from how he had behaved with their other children. Instead of being attentive, he started spending more and more time away, sometimes staying out overnight. Ashley confided in her sister that she was worried about Emmett's actions and suspected he might be cheating on her. Around the same time, Emmett's assistant, Candy Hall, was experiencing her own marital problems. She told a friend that her husband, Rob, was jealous of her working for the charismatic Emmett, and their constant fights were affecting their marriage. On their 7th wedding anniversary, March 6, 2011, Ashley was left alone with the children while Emmett claimed he was attending a bodybuilding convention. Ashley felt panicked and concerned about her marriage, wondering if she was doing something wrong that made Emmett unhappy. Although she was unhappy, Ashley was determined to work through their problems and make their marriage better, as divorce was not an option for her. Ashley decided to tackle the issue head-on. She planned a perfect evening to mend her relationship with Emmett, cooking his favorite meal and ensuring the kids were on their best behavior. But when he arrived 2 hours late, he turned away from her kiss. Undeterred, Ashley remained steadfast in her goal to rekindle their love, believing it was worth trying to. 2 hours after Ashley finished preparing dinner, the Corrigan family gathered around the table to eat. However, Emmett claimed he wasn't hungry, despite Ashley's obvious effort and attention to detail. It was clear she had invested a lot of time, thought, and love into the meal, but Emmett's lack of interest left Ashley feeling disappointed and hurt. As the rest of the family enjoyed their meal, Emmett suddenly got up, saying he needed to go to Walgreens. He promised to be right back, seeming not to notice Ashley's growing concern. Ashley suspected there was more to Emmett's actions and begged him to stay and connect with her, reminding him of their family's importance. However, Emmett responded harshly, telling Ashley not to dictate what he did. He then left the house, leaving Ashley feeling confused and hurt. On the same day, another issue was emerging in Emmett's life. His assistant Candy and her husband Rob Hall were at a crisis point in their marriage. Despite their love for each other, Rob was packing his belongings, deciding to leave their home, believing it was best to distance himself and start fresh. That evening, Rob phoned his daughter to ask if she was out driving Candy's car. She told him she wasn't. A few minutes later, his daughter drove past Walgreens and spotted Candy's car in the parking lot, but thought little of it. She immediately called her father to report her discovery. Rob's initial reaction was a casual, "Oh, okay." Little did they realize that this ordinary phone call was about to drastically change the course of two families' lives forever. Meanwhile, Ashley lay in bed, her heart heavy with worry, praying fervently for her marriage to succeed. She had been texting and calling Emmett desperately, trying to reach him, but he wasn't responding. Her intuition told her something was wrong, and she couldn't shake off a sense of unease. Around 1 p.m., a 911 call reported gunshots and a screaming woman in the Walgreens parking lot, prompting a rapid police response. As they arrived at the scene, officers were uncertain about what they would find. Had there been a random drive-by shooting, a botched drug deal, a robbery, or something entirely different? Without knowing what to expect, they approached the area with caution. When the first officer stepped out of the patrol car, he was met with a horrific scene. A lifeless body lay on the ground, and a second person, wounded and in agony, was clutching their head. The injured person was rushed to the hospital with a gunshot wound, leaving the police with more questions than answers. Amidst the chaos, one key witness caught the police's attention. Her name was Candy Hall, and she was present at the crime scene. At the hospital, Candy identified the injured man as her husband, Rob, and the deceased man as her boss, Emmett. The autopsy revealed that Emmett had been shot twice, once in the head and once in the chest. Shortly after Emmett's lifeless body was discovered in the Walgreens parking lot, his wife Ashley received a knock on her front door. When she answered, she was greeted by police officers who broke the devastating news. Her husband, Emmett, had been shot and killed. Ashley was left stunned, inconsolable, and bewildered, struggling to comprehend what could have led to this tragic event. After the police informed Ashley that her husband had been killed, a detective asked her about Rob and Candy Hall. Ashley knew Candy as Emmett's assistant, but she suspected that Candy and Emmett were having an affair. The police took Candy in for questioning from the Walgreens parking lot, trying to piece together what led to Emmett's murder and Rob being shot in the head. When detectives asked Candy if she had a romantic relationship with her boss Emmett, she denied it. They also asked if they had ever had sex, and Candy strongly denied that too. Candy told the detectives that she had gone to Walgreens that night to pick up a prescription. She claimed to have run into Emmett by chance in the store, and they decided to go for a drive in his car. As they drove to a gas station, Candy's phone rang. It was her estranged husband, Rob. Candy told Rob that she was out with Emmett, but the conversation turned sour when Rob became jealous and threatened to hurt Emmett. At long last, Candy and Emmett pulled up to Walgreens. As they got out of the car, Candy's heart sank when she saw Rob standing at the entrance, his face red with anger. The air was electric with tension as a fierce argument broke out between Rob and Emmett, which quickly escalated into a physical fight. Just as suddenly, 3 loud gunshots rang out. Candy spun around to see both men lying on the ground. She quickly spotted the gun lying nearby, picked it up, and flung it away from herself. Candy couldn't identify who fired the first shot. Rob was shot in the head, stitched up, and questioned by detectives. They found his gun at the scene and asked who it belonged to. Rob said it was his, explaining Emmett and he fought in a parking lot. The gun fell, they struggled, Emmett shot Rob, and Rob couldn't recall who fired the fatal shot due to his wound. Detectives wondered if Emmett might have fired first, since he ended up dead. Since the shooting took place in the Walgreens parking lot, the detectives turned to the security footage for answers. Upon reviewing the footage, they noticed Rob Hall arriving in the parking lot at 9:55 p.m. 1 minute later, Rob was seen entering the Walgreens store, seemingly searching for someone as he rushed through each aisle. The security footage captured Rob exiting the Walgreens at 10:06 p.m. and parking his car beside Candy's vehicle. He then waited there for the next few minutes. Approximately 10 minutes later, Emmett's truck appeared on the footage as it pulled into the parking lot. However, the shooting itself was not caught on camera. Candy initially denied being romantically involved with her boss, but rumors among their co-workers suggested otherwise. According to their co-workers, Candy and Rob were seen frequently spending time together in his office with the door closed, just 3 weeks after she was hired. On the day Emmett was shot, detectives made a curious discovery. Emmett had accompanied Candy to the public defender's office to discuss divorcing Rob. During the investigation into Emmett Corrigan's murder, crime scene investigators searched his vehicle in the parking lot and found steroids in the glove compartment. This discovery wasn't a surprise to many of Emmett's loved ones, as he had been heavily focused on bodybuilding and his behavior had changed, leading some to suspect he was using steroids. When Candy gave her statement to the detectives, she described a specific pattern of shots that suggested Rob shot and killed Emmett twice before turning the gun on himself and shooting himself in the head. This evidence was enough for the detectives to obtain an arrest warrant for Rob Hall, charging him with first-degree murder. As a result, Rob Hall was arrested and charged with Emmett Corrigan's murder. Rob Hall faced severe consequences for his actions. A conviction for first-degree murder would have resulted in either life imprisonment without parole or the death penalty. When Rob Hall went on trial for the murder of Ashley, Emmett's widow hoped the trial would bring her some closure and help her grieve. She believed that understanding her husband's affair and death would provide her with a sense of closure. According to the prosecution, Rob was enraged by Emmett's affair with his wife Candy and blamed him for ruining his marriage. They claimed that Rob shot Emmett and then attempted to take his own life. However, Rob's defense team presented a different account. They argued that Emmett was the aggressor on the night of his death and had a history of abusing steroids. The defense alleged that during the altercation, Emmett grabbed Rob's gun, shot Rob, and then Rob regained control of the weapon and killed Emmett in self-defense. Candy Hall, the wife of Rob Hall, was a key witness in his trial. Her testimony during the trial differed slightly from the account she provided to the police on the night of Emmett's death. On the witness stand, Candy claimed to have heard a distinct sequence of shots, stating that there was an initial pop, followed by 2 more quick pops. This revised account supported the defense's argument, which suggested that Emmett had shot Rob Hall first, before Rob managed to regain control of the gun and shoot Emmett twice, resulting in his death. Prosecutors needed to prove Rob, not Emmett, was the Walgreens shooter. They presented forensic evidence that the murder weapon leaves significant gunshot residue, GSR, after firing. Tests showed Rob had 32 GSR particles on his left palm and 23 on his right, while Emmett had 1 on his left hand and none on his right, proving Rob fired the gun. After careful consideration, the jury found Rob Hall not guilty of first-degree murder. However, they did reach a unanimous decision that he was guilty of second-degree murder, meaning the murder was not premeditated. The judge presiding over the case sentenced Rob to 30 years in prison, and he will be eligible for parole in 2028 when he is 58 years old. Despite being convicted, Rob has consistently claimed innocence and appealed his conviction in 2021. However, the Idaho Supreme Court upheld his conviction, denying him a retrial. 2 months after Emmett's murder, Candy Hall was arrested and charged with embezzlement for allegedly stealing from her previous employer, an attorney. These embezzlement charges were unrelated to Emmett's murder. Instead of facing the original embezzlement allegations, Candy pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of grand theft and received a prison sentence. She was released on parole in 2014, but remains on probation until 2026. Candy Hall spoke candidly on Dateline, overcome with guilt about the incident's harm to her relationships with her kids. She's unsure how to move forward, hoping to prove to them it was a regrettable mistake. Ashley's life was shattered when her husband Emmett was murdered by his lover's husband. She bravely confronted Emmett's lover on Dr. Phil in 2015. Refusing to be defined by grief, Ashley rebuilt her life by leaving the past behind and starting anew. She moved to a new town, and her 5 kids slowly rediscovered happiness. Ashley found love again, remarried, and had 2 more kids. Now she uses her blog to support others who've endured trauma. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michael Haight. Michael Haight was born on January 7, 1980 in Seattle, Washington, but his family moved to Cedar City, Utah, when he was young, after his father finished dental school. Growing up, Michael was an active boy who enjoyed playing baseball, basketball, and soccer. He achieved the rank of Eagle Scout and performed well academically. After graduating from high school in 1998, Michael worked at a fish plant in Alaska during the summer, where he quickly rose to the position of line manager, overseeing more than a dozen men due to his strong work ethic and dedication. Michael then served a mission trip to South Brazil as a devoted member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which further deepened his faith and strengthened his bond with his religious community. Upon returning to the United States, Michael pursued a business degree at Southern Utah University, graduating in 2004. During his time at the university, he met his future wife, Tasha Earl, and they fell in love, getting married in the St. George Temple on May 10, 2003. Michael seemed like the perfect family man to those who didn't know him. He was always involved in his kids' lives, coaching their sports teams, attending school concerts, and spending quality time with them, whether it was sledding or working on projects in the garage. But on January 4, 2023, the illusion he created around his family life shattered. That day, police found 8 dead bodies at the Haight residence, leaving investigators and neighbors stunned and confused. When Tasha Haight missed an online appointment and her husband Michael failed to show up for work, their colleagues became worried and alerted the police to check on the family's welfare at their home in Enoch. The officers arrived at the Haight residence, but no one answered the door. As they walked around the property, it looked like nobody was home. Knowing the family had 5 kids, the police contacted the Iron County School District to see if any of the children were in school that day, but it turned out none of the kids were present when the police arrived at the Haight home. The officers searched the premises to make sure there was no immediate danger, and after a thorough search, confirmed that nobody needed medical attention, and there were no signs of an active threat. The detectives arrived at the crime scene shortly after it was declared. Upon entering the main bedroom, they saw 4-year-old Gavin lying on his stomach with his head turned to the left, one arm under his head on a pillow, and a blanket covering part of his body. His sister Tasha was similarly positioned with only part of her body covered by the blanket. On the other side of the bed, they found Gail Earle, Tasha's mother, lying on her back with her head on a pillow and partially covered by a blanket, just like her daughter and grandson. In Bry's room, the detectives found the 12-year-old girl lying in bed, slightly inclined and partially covered with a blanket. In Amon's room, they discovered the 7-year-old boy lying face down in the corner of the room, without a pillow or blanket. His twin sister Hriana was found in her bedroom, lying on her left side in bed with her head resting on a pillow and covered with a blanket. The eldest child, 17-year-old Macy, was found in her bed, her head resting on a pillow and her body covered by the blanket. The detectives discovered Michael Haight's body in the exercise room in the basement of his home, lying on top of a sleeping bag. All 8 victims, including his wife, mother-in-law, and 5 children, were found dead with gunshot wounds. Given the circumstances, it didn't take long for the detectives to identify Michael Haight as the primary suspect. They believed he had killed his family members before taking his own life. A neighbor's testimony played a crucial role in helping the detectives reconstruct the timeline of the crime. The neighbor recalled waking up at 3:30 a.m. to use the bathroom and hearing a loud bang, similar to fireworks, as she exited her room. However, she felt annoyed because it was past the permitted date for fireworks in the neighborhood. She then heard 2 more bangs in quick succession, followed by a short pause. This pattern continued, with brief pauses before each subsequent bang, except for a longer pause before the final one. Based on the neighbor's statement and the condition of the 8 bodies found inside the house, detectives theorized that the loud noises she had heard around 3:30 a.m. were directly connected to the events of that night. They suspected that Michael Hatch committed the brutal murders during this specific time frame. During the investigation into the Hatch family murders, detectives discovered that an unnamed person outside the family had reported abuse to the Utah Division of Child and Family Services in 2020. This individual claimed that 14-year-old Macy confided in them about her fear of her father, sparking a deeper investigation into the Hatch household. After receiving the DCFS report, Macy and her parents were questioned separately. During Macy's interview, the investigator uncovered disturbing information. Macy revealed that her father had choked her on multiple occasions, and she feared he would kill her. She disclosed that the violent attacks began in 2017, including an incident where her father grabbed her by the shoulders and pushed her into a wooden piece of furniture. When detectives questioned Michael Hatch, he claimed he had never physically harmed his daughter. He downplayed the incidents Macy described, saying they were simply misunderstandings. Michael attributed his emotional turmoil to 2 recent events: the death of his father and his brother's divorce. He stated that, in his distress, he took out his frustration on his older daughter, Tasha. Tasha chose not to pursue criminal charges against Michael. Similarly, the Utah Department of Children and Family Services, the Enoch Police Department, and the Iron County Prosecutor's Office decided not to press charges, deeming the case insufficient to meet the prosecution requirements set by the statute. A lethality assessment was conducted with Tasha, which revealed that her relationship with Michael did not pose a significant threat to her life. Nevertheless, victim services were made available to Tasha and her children for several months following the case's opening. Through conversations with Tasha's friends, detectives formed a different impression of Michael Hatch than the one he presented to the community. Tasha's friends revealed that whenever they visited, they would often chat with her, while the kitchen water was running to mask their conversation, as Tasha suspected Michael was spying on her discussions. They also helped Tasha with housework during their visits so Michael wouldn't have anything to criticize her about. Tasha's friends disclosed that whenever she texted them, she would respond with brief, upbeat messages, likely aware that Michael might read them. They believed she did this to maintain a positive facade for Michael's benefit, implying that everything was fine in their marriage. Detectives found Michael displayed controlling behavior towards his wife, Tasha. He took away her car keys and phone to keep her from leaving. They also suspected him after he overreacted to her buying a $30 rug from Walmart, accusing her of excessive spending despite the legitimate need. Tasha shared with her friends her concerns that her 7-year-old son, Amon, was increasingly mimicking his father Michael's bad behavior. Whenever she gave Amon an instruction, he would respond by saying that it was not his job. This worried Tasha because it revealed Amon's growing lack of responsibility and disregard for authority. She mentioned that Michael frequently disregarded or ignored her instructions, and Amon seemed to be following his example. In 2022, Tasha prioritized self-care by getting her nails done despite her busy schedule. However, her husband Michael wasn't supportive, imposing strict rules on her independence. After her appointment, Tasha felt confident and told Michael she'd make it a monthly routine, sparking his anger over the potential cost. To address Michael's concerns, Tasha explained calmly that her monthly self-care expenses came out to $25. Despite this, Michael remained skeptical, claiming that by spending money on her nails, Tasha was essentially taking away from their children's basic needs. This stance stemmed from his need for control and sense of financial responsibility towards their family. At the same time, Tasha began to prioritize her self-care and eventually started losing weight, a significant change after years of her husband calling her fat and ugly. Michael became angry about her weight loss, accusing Tasha of cheating on him as he struggled to explain the sudden change in her appearance. As Michael's controlling behavior escalated, he tried to manipulate Tasha regarding her weight loss. He begged her to stop, fearing that other men might find her attractive. Underlying this request were his deep-seated insecurities and desire for complete control over his wife's body and actions. Michael exhibited a frugal attitude during the holiday season, despite earning a significant income. He allocated only $100 for each of their 5 children to buy gifts, whereas Tasha made sure they had a fulfilling Christmas. However, Michael refused to provide additional funds for his wife and children, justifying his stance by claiming that he didn't see the need to give them more of what he believed was rightfully his. Michael controlled every aspect of Tasha's life, including her cleaning and childcare habits. He insisted on using baby wipes, claiming they were eco-friendly and cost-effective, but this caused Tasha stress and compromised her comfort and hygiene. If she didn't comply, Michael threatened trouble, leaving her fearful and submissive. According to Tasha's friends, she revealed to them that Michael was mean to her throughout their marriage, but he didn't mistreat their children until the late 2010s. However, as time passed, the abuse towards Macy worsened, causing her to contemplate suicide. Michael had unrealistically high expectations for Macy, demanding she maintain straight A's despite her struggles. The pressure to meet his expectations became overwhelming for Macy, who was already dealing with the emotional weight of her father's abuse. Macy's friends shared another disturbing incident with the detective. One evening, Michael came home and found Macy resting her head on her mother's lap. He became enraged and ordered Macy to get up and clean her room. This event left Macy deeply shaken, as she remembered gazing into her father's eyes and seeing hatred and evil staring back. Detectives found another instance where 7-year-old Briley disobeyed Michael's warnings. Michael blamed his wife Tasha for their kids' misbehavior, calling them the worst in the world. He berated Tasha in front of their kids, even calling her fat and ugly. Tasha realized she needed to escape her 20-year marriage to Michael after a distressing incident exposed his abusive nature and temper. Seeing the harm it was causing their kids, she knew she had to leave. Tasha decided to divorce Michael after over 20 years, prioritizing their children's well-being over their marriage. On Dec 21, 2022, she initiated proceedings, but asked to delay serving papers until after the holiday season, wanting one last normal Christmas for their 5 kids before the separation. Michael got divorce papers at his office on Dec 27th. He called Tasha, acting normal, asking about her day, like nothing was wrong. He told her to leave the house, but wanted the kids to stay. Tasha refused, insisting on taking the kids with her. Tasha took the children to her mother's house in Lynn, Utah. That evening, Michael arrived at his mother-in-law's house and tried to persuade Tasha to go for a ride with him. But Tasha declined, telling her friends she had a bad feeling about going anywhere alone with Michael. After Tasha filed for divorce, her mom Gail moved in to help. However, Michael made things worse by moving into the basement fitness room instead of leaving the house. Tasha told her friends she had found a discrepancy in their children's savings accounts, which held $220,000. What she discovered shocked her. Michael had transferred the money out of the accounts without her knowledge or permission. After her father's death, Tasha inherited several firearms, including hunting rifles and a handgun. When she checked her house in January 2023, she realized all the guns were gone. Further investigation revealed Michael had taken the weapons, leaving Tasha and her family defenseless in case of an emergency. Macy, Michael and Tasha's eldest child, confided in her friends that she would welcome her parents' divorce. She longed for the peace that would come with her father's absence from the home. Macy even kept a secret phone in her room, which she used to record her father's erratic behavior, hoping to gather evidence to support the divorce. However, Tasha found the phone and hid it away. Macy's younger sister, Briley, had a troubled home life due to the constant drama. To escape this, Briley would often visit her neighbor's house, where she found comfort with their grandchildren. Briley confided in a friend that she was relieved about her parents' upcoming divorce. She had even bought some new books, but was too afraid to tell her father, fearing he would become angry. Tasha met her lawyer on January 3, 2023, to discuss her divorce from abusive husband Michael. She felt relieved he'd moved to the basement due to his volatile behavior. Asked if she'd ever feared for her or her children's safety, Tasha said she never had. In hindsight, Tasha's optimism was tragically misplaced. The police investigation was harrowing, piecing together a chilling sequence of events. A disturbing Google search on December 30th stood out, revealing Michael's firearms queries just days before the deadly shooting, painting a chilling picture of his intentions. The search results revealed alarming questions, such as inquiries about how loud a 9mm gunshot is, what a gunshot sounds like, what to do if gunshots are heard near one's house, if a single gunshot in the neighborhood at night would be immediately recognized, and if one would be brave enough to call the police, how loud a gunshot in the house would be, and if a neighbor would hear a gunshot in the garage, and how loud a 40mm pistol is. Michael's suicide note said he'd rather rot in hell than endure his wife's controlling behavior. He felt desperate, frustrated, and trapped, repeatedly asking for help that never came. Determined to end the manipulation, he refused to be a burden to society. The case's details have shocked many, revealing a deeply dysfunctional family plagued by violence, Michael's actions were premeditated, carefully planned to catch his family off guard. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Brooke Skylar Richardson. The Richardson family consisted of Kim and Scott Richardson, who were devoted parents actively involved in their children's lives. Their son Jackson was passionate about football, while their daughter Brooke Skylar, or simply Skylar, was a cheerleader. Skylar struggled with an eating disorder, which had taken over her life from a very young age. Her mother, Kim, first became aware of Skylar's eating habits issues when she was in the 6th grade at just 12 years old. Skylar's fixation on food and exercise became increasingly apparent, such as when she refused to buy gum if it had more than 5 calories. As a flyer on the cheerleading squad, Skylar felt pressured to maintain a certain weight, which made her struggle even harder. Her obsession with her body image and the constant fear of gaining weight had consumed her. Skylar's battle with weight and body image started when she was a cheerleader. To stay at a certain weight, she began throwing up after eating. However, this harmful habit made her problems worse. After the cheerleading season ended, Skylar's struggle with her weight got even harder. She would have times where she ate too much food in a short time, known as binge eating, and then times where she would hardly eat or follow very strict diets. Skylar's parents saw the change in her behavior and were worried about her health. They tried to talk to her about it, but Skylar would shut them down whenever they brought it up. She didn't want to discuss it, and any attempt to talk about her weight was met with resistance. Frustrated, Skylar's parents looked for professional help from doctors and therapists, hoping they could help their daughter. After an evaluation, Skylar was diagnosed with body dysmorphia, a condition characterized by an obsessive focus on a perceived flaw in appearance, often leading to significant distress and impairment in daily functioning. In the summer of 2016, just before her senior year, Skylar started dating her friend's cousin. However, the relationship was short-lived, and by January 2017, she had moved on to a new boyfriend, Brandon, a high school student. At this time, Skylar seemed genuinely happy and was gaining weight. Her parents, Kim and Scott, were hopeful that her eating disorder was under control as they noticed her healthy appearance and genuine happiness. In February, Skylar chose her prom dress, a tight-fitting one that required her to be laced into it. A month later, in mid-March, Skylar went on a family vacation, during which she wore a 2-piece swimsuit. Her mom, Kim, thought she looked great. Kim, aware that Skylar and Brandon were getting close, wanted Skylar to start taking birth control pills, believing this would protect her daughter's health and prevent unwanted pregnancies. In mid-April 2017, Skylar visited her mother's gynecologist to get a birth control prescription. Kim waited outside the doctor's office while Skylar met with the doctor. After leaving the examination room, Skylar emerged in tears. Kim immediately asked her daughter why she was so upset, and Skylar replied that it was a traumatic experience. Unbeknownst to Kim, the real reason behind Skylar's tears was that the doctor had informed her that she was approximately 8 months pregnant. Skylar asked the doctor to keep the news secret, as she wasn't ready to share it with her loved ones. 9 days after the incident, Skylar, who was heavily pregnant at the time, attended her prom with her boyfriend Brandon on May 5th. Despite her advanced pregnancy, Skylar was able to fit into her prom gown. 2 months later, on July 14, 2017, the police arrived at the Richardson home. They informed Skylar's parents, Kim and Scott, that they needed to speak with Skylar about something she may have witnessed. The police reassured the parents that Skylar was not in any trouble and took her at their word. Scott decided to drive Skylar to the police station, unsure of what would happen when they got there. The police wanted to ask Skylar some questions about a call they had received from a doctor who specializes in women's health. This doctor's office had reported that one of their patients, a young woman, had given birth to a baby and then buried the baby in her backyard. When they arrived at the police station, the police took Skylar into custody, and put her in a room where they would ask her questions. Skylar's father was not allowed to be in the room with her before the interview started. The police then read Skylar her rights and told her about the call they had received from the doctor's office. According to the caller, on April 26th, Skylar had gone to the doctor's office and found out she was pregnant. But when she went back to the office, she told the doctor that the baby was not alive and that she had buried it in her backyard. During her police interview, Skylar confessed to giving birth to a stillborn baby girl on May 7, 2017. She revealed that she had delivered the baby in her bathroom, where she discovered the infant wasn't breathing and had no heartbeat. Skylar felt compelled to bury the baby and opted to keep the incident a secret. Without making a sound, Skylar went downstairs, fetched a small garden shovel, and dug a shallow grave in her backyard. She buried the baby, marking the spot and preserving the memory of her child. Skylar placed a vase with a flower at the burial site. After questioning Skylar, the police informed her parents, Kim and Scott, about the true reason she was brought to the station. Kim and Scott were stunned to learn their daughter had been pregnant, as they were completely unaware. Kim was devastated upon hearing the news, saddened that her daughter had endured this ordeal alone. Skylar told her parents she had named the baby Annabelle and said the father was a cousin of a close friend, someone she had briefly dated. Then, crime scene investigators arrived at the Richardson home to search for the baby's remains. The investigators carefully searched the area, removing weeds and brushing the ground to uncover any hidden evidence. Despite the overgrown vegetation, they thoroughly examined every inch of the area. After clearing the weeds and brushing the ground, the police found several bones, including parts of the skull. They carefully collected these remains, placing them in small body bags to preserve any evidence they might hold. The investigators took great care to handle the bones gently, ensuring they remained intact. One investigator recalled that the remains had a strong odor, while another investigator acknowledged that the bones were extremely small, making it challenging to distinguish them from rocks. The coroner confirmed the discovery of hair and tiny fingernails, but no organs or other recognizable features. After being questioned for over 5 hours, Skylar and her parents were permitted to return home. However, 6 days later, the police contacted Skylar, requesting her presence once again. They reassured her father, Scott, that she was not in trouble. During the subsequent interview with Skylar, the police revealed that they had received new information from the coroner's office that contradicted her initial account. The medical examiner who analyzed the remains claimed to have found evidence suggesting that the baby's bones may have been subjected to fire. Skylar was taken aback when the police told her that her baby had been burned. She strongly denied starting a fire, insisting that she would never harm her child. However, the police were convinced that Skylar was guilty of killing her baby girl and trying to destroy the evidence by burning her remains. They suggested that Skylar might have tried to cremate the baby's body to get rid of it, but this idea only confused Skylar further. She remained adamant that she hadn't burned the baby. But then Skylar changed her story. She told the police that she did have a lighter and might have used it to try to cremate her baby's remains. She also revealed that the baby might have been born alive, as it had made a sound, possibly even cried, on one occasion. Skylar admitted to holding the newborn too tightly, which might have contributed to its death. During a 1-hour interrogation, the police collected enough evidence to arrest Skylar on a charge of reckless homicide. They believed that Skylar had suffocated the baby. After presenting their case to a grand jury, Skylar was eventually indicted and arrested for aggravated murder, a charge that carries a mandatory life sentence in Ohio. At her arraignment, Skylar pleaded not guilty to the additional charges of voluntary manslaughter, abuse of a corpse, and putting children in danger. She spent the weekend in jail until her family could secure a $50,000 bond. Following the tragic death of her child, Skylar found herself at the center of a fierce media storm. From the moment her name was made public, The public judged and scrutinized everything she and her family did. The constant judgment and scrutiny had a severe impact on their well-being, leading them to retreat to the safety of their own home. However, even there, they received threats that made it difficult for them to venture outside, and the public would take pictures of them, further fueling the frenzy and adding to the immense pressure they faced. The public scrutiny became overwhelming, affecting every part of their lives. Although Skylar's defense attorneys thought she had given a false confession and the baby's death was an accident, the prosecution refused to change their approach. Despite new evidence that didn't support their first conclusion, they continued with their case. A key piece of evidence was the medical examiner's initial report, which said the remains were burned. However, after re-examining the evidence, the medical examiner withdrew this statement, saying there was no proof of burning. Even with this new information, the prosecution didn't change their approach. They focused on Skylar's admission that she had tried to cremate the remains, even though the evidence didn't support their theory of a burned body. This showed the state's determination to get a conviction, regardless of the evidence. Skylar's family endured immense stress and fear from public scrutiny and threats, making daily life unbearable. Her defense team worked tirelessly to prepare her case. Though they raised $50,000 for bail, Skylar's release came with an ankle monitor, keeping her mostly homebound and isolated. Over a period of 12 months, Skylar's life underwent a drastic change. She had to put her plans to attend the University of Cincinnati on hold while she waited for her trial, having been accused of murdering her baby. The charges against her were severe, and her defense team filed a motion to have the trial transferred to a different county. However, the request was denied, which meant Skylar had to face the trial in the original jurisdiction. Skylar felt overwhelmed by her situation, struggling to cope with the emotional toll of the allegations and feeling isolated. Her dogs became her main comfort, providing companionship as she awaited trial. Despite the challenges, her family stood by her, believing in her innocence and supporting her fight for freedom. In July 2019, the state made an unexpected offer to Skylar's defense attorney. The offer was that if Skylar pleaded guilty to the remaining charges, which had a 15-year sentence, the state would drop the charge of aggravated murder. Skylar's parents were torn about this decision and wondered if she should take the deal. After thinking it over carefully, Skylar decided to reject the plea deal. This decision scared her parents, who questioned whether she had made the right choice, but they knew it was her decision to make, not theirs. On September 3, 2019, Skylar stood trial for the murder of her newborn daughter. In their opening statements, the prosecution presented a text message Skylar had sent to her mother, in which she expressed happiness and mentioned that her belly had already returned to its normal size, just a few hours after giving birth. The prosecution argued that this message, along with others she sent to her mother and boyfriend within 24 hours of the baby's death, suggested that Skylar was relieved about the baby's death, and pointed to these texts as evidence that she was involved in the baby's death. The prosecution also alleged that Skylar had searched online for how to get rid of a baby, and that her mother, Kim, had warned her that her life would be over if she became pregnant, which had apparently frightened Skylar. According to the prosecutor, Skylar was determined to keep her pregnancy a secret, and when she could no longer conceal her daughter, she took her daughter's life. During the trial, the doctor who performed the autopsy on Skylar's baby testified. She concluded that the baby died from a violent homicide, but couldn't determine if the skull fractures occurred before or after death. Instead, she based her opinion on Skylar's statements during the police interrogation. Skylar's defense attorney questioned the doctor's findings, suggesting she may have been influenced by confirmation bias. The attorney argued that the doctor had already formed an opinion and wasn't likely to change it during cross-examination. The doctor acknowledged that she didn't examine the baby's remains under a dissecting microscope. The attorney asked if she had consulted an obstetrician, and she replied that she hadn't. The attorney also asked if she had looked at photos of the burial site or Skylar's backyard, and again, the doctor said she hadn't. A fetal medicine specialist, another doctor, testified in the afternoon session of Skylar's trial, primarily under questioning by the prosecution. The doctor questioned the claim that Skylar's baby was stillborn, pointing out that there was only one screening and that measurements of fundal height during the third trimester of pregnancy have a 60% margin of error. The doctor also noted that Skylar had reported feeling her baby move, which is not possible for a deceased baby. Furthermore, the doctor expressed skepticism about a report filed by a doctor for the defense, which suggested that Skylar's baby likely had growth issues. During cross-examination by Skylar's attorney, the doctor was asked if he was being paid by the prosecution. He explained that he received $5,000 per day, which is the cost to his practice when a doctor is absent. In the courtroom, the prosecution presented their case against Skylar, revealing shocking and heart-wrenching evidence. The most impactful pieces of evidence were the pictures of the deceased baby's remains displayed on the television screen. Skylar's reactions during the trial, when the pictures of her baby's remains appeared on the screen, showed the lasting impact these images had on her. Initially, Skylar stared straight ahead, avoiding eye contact with the photos, seemingly unable to bear the sight. This stoic demeanor was in contrast to her behavior the previous day, when she visibly trembled as the judge sat down before jury selection. Skylar's defense team presented their case, arguing that her life was far from perfect, even before the murder accusation. They claimed that the prosecution's evidence consisted of half-truths and that some texts presented in court were taken out of context. The defense team argued that Skylar's frequent use of informal texting language did not necessarily mean she committed the crime of murdering her daughter. They highlighted Skylar's mental health struggles, specifically her long-standing battle with an eating disorder that began when she was 12. The team presented evidence that Skylar regularly saw a psychologist and nutritionist to manage her condition, and showed the jury photos of Skylar at different weights and appearances, including when she was extremely thin and when she appeared slightly heavier. Skylar's defense attorneys highlighted that despite her physical condition, she had cradled the baby for hours while bleeding on the bathroom floor, demonstrating her strong commitment to comforting and caring for the lifeless body after enduring extreme pain. The attorneys told the court that Skylar had planned to inform her family about her pregnancy, but unfortunately, she never got the chance, according to her doctor. Skylar was told she would give birth within 8 to 10 weeks, so she assumed she would have enough time to attend the prom and graduate from high school before discussing the situation with her mother, whom she knew would be unsupportive. During the defense, an obstetrician testified that the baby was stillborn. He argued that since Scott didn't admit to cutting the umbilical cord, it's possible it detached before or during birth. The doctor also pointed out that Skylar's description of the baby's pale appearance was notable, as newborns are usually a purplish color, indicating they're healthy. Additionally, the obstetrician stated that Skylar's weight gain of only 15 pounds throughout her pregnancy was minimal, and suggested that her eating disorder may have restricted the baby's development in the womb. This testimony aimed to raise questions about the accuracy of Skylar's statements to the police regarding the baby's well-being. The defense argued that Skylar had been selective in what she told the police during her interrogation, omitting any harmful behavior towards the baby, and that her testimony lacked credibility. They suggested that other factors might have contributed to the baby's death. After a one-week trial, the jury deliberated for 4 hours before delivering a verdict. Skylar was acquitted of aggravated murder, involuntary manslaughter, and child endangerment. However, she was found guilty of abuse of a corpse, a felony carrying a maximum 1-year prison sentence. The judge ordered her to remain in jail until her sentencing hearing, which took place the following day. At the sentencing hearing, Skylar apologized for her actions and acknowledged the seriousness of her mistakes. The judge was unsympathetic, rebuking Skylar for her role in the tragic loss of her baby. He emphasized that better decisions during her pregnancy would have saved her child's life. The judge's words were stern and unyielding, making it clear that Skylar's choices had devastating consequences. After expressing his dissatisfaction with Skylar's behavior, the judge sentenced her to 3 years of probation for abusing a corpse. This sentence served as a reminder that her actions were both morally wrong and illegal. In November 2020, Skylar's lawyers asked the judge to end her probation 2 years early, and the request was granted. During the hearing, Skylar said she wanted to return to a normal life and didn't need a probation officer to supervise her anymore. The judge acknowledged her progress and agreed that the probation department no longer needed to devote resources to her case. The judge emphasized that probation is not just about punishing or rehabilitating someone, but also giving them a chance to show why they shouldn't be sent to prison. Since being found not guilty, Skylar has made the most of her second chance. She has finished 2 semesters of college and has been working part-time at the law firm that defended her. Although she was cleared of all charges, Skylar has encountered difficulties in finding more employment due to her being on probation. However, she remains resolute in pursuing her career ambitions and has shown an interest in going to law school to become a public defender. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Ryan Poston. Ryan Poston was born on December 30th, 1982, in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky, to Lisa and Jay Poston. He had a strong and loving bond with his 3 sisters, Allison, Catherine, and Elizabeth, throughout his life. Growing up, Ryan had the opportunity to travel extensively and attend schools in Switzerland and the Philippines. This exposure broadened his horizons and gave him an adventurous spirit. Ryan was also known for his striking good looks, which, coupled with his charismatic personality, made him stand out in a crowd. After graduating from high school, Ryan attended Indiana University, where he earned a degree in political science, history, and geography. He excelled academically and graduated with honors in 2005. Following in the footsteps of his family members, Ryan pursued a career in law. He enrolled in the Salmon P. Chase College of Law at Northern Kentucky University, driven by his admiration for the legal profession. His esteemed grandfather and uncle, both practicing attorneys, were his role models. Ryan's ultimate goal was to own a successful law firm. While in Cincinnati, Ohio, Ryan dedicated himself to helping people who couldn't afford expensive lawyers. Despite being young, he had already built a strong reputation, and many sought his advice. He worked hard to ensure everyone had access to fair and competent legal representation, regardless of their financial situation. After a painful breakup in 2011, Ryan turned to his cousin Carissa for comfort and support. During a visit to Lexington, Kentucky to spend time with her, he met Hriana Hubers, a Lexington native, and his life took an unexpected turn. Hriana Hubers embodied the quintessential Southern girl, renowned for her outgoing personality and effortless ability to form friendships. Her warm and charming demeanor naturally drew people to her. After graduating high school in 2009 with a full scholarship, she continued her education at the University of Kentucky, majoring in psychology, before pursuing her master's degree in psychology at Eastern Kentucky University. Despite their 8-year age gap, Ryan was 29, while Hriana was just 21. Their feelings for each other grew increasingly undeniable. With each visit Ryan made to see his cousin Carissa in Lexington, he found himself devoting more time to Hriana. As they spent more time together, their bond deepened. Hriana began spending more time in Highland Heights, the Kentucky suburb where Ryan lived. Every weekend, she would pack a bag and visit Ryan's home, dedicating herself to taking care of him, cooking his meals, and cleaning his living space. As time went on, Ryan and Hriana's relationship grew stronger, and he took her to meet his parents. She was over the moon with excitement, telling her friends all about Ryan and even saying she wanted to become Mrs. Ryan Poston. But their promising future came to a tragic end on October 12, 2012. In a panicked call to the police, Hriana admitted to fatally shooting her boyfriend, Ryan. The details she shared revealed a devastating scene of domestic violence that had spun out of control. According to Hriana, Ryan had tried to physically abuse her, dragging her out of the house when she attempted to gather her belongings. She told the 911 dispatcher that Ryan had confronted her with a gun, leading to a physical fight. In the heat of the moment, Hriana managed to grab the gun, but she was intimidated by Ryan's size. In a state of panic, she pulled the trigger, ultimately shooting Ryan. Hriana admitted that she believed Ryan's death was inevitable, so she claimed she wanted to end his suffering. She told the 911 dispatcher that Ryan was in distress, making unusual sounds, which motivated her to shoot him several more times. Afterwards, she revealed that she left the gun on a bookshelf. Minutes after Hriana called 911 to report that she had shot her boyfriend, officers were sent to the scene. When they arrived, they told Hriana to come out of the apartment with her hands up. At first, she was hesitant, but she eventually followed their orders. As she walked out, they told her to lie face down on the ground. It was clear that Hriana was very upset as she complied with their instructions. After the officers handcuffed Hriana and put her in the back of their patrol car, they entered the apartment and found Ryan Poston's body on the dining room floor, covered in blood. Crime scene investigators arrived and examined Ryan's condo, which looked a bit messy, but nothing out of the ordinary for a 29-year-old man. They found that Ryan had a concealed carry permit and owned weapons, including the Sig Sauer semi-automatic gun that Hriana used to shoot him. Based on the evidence they gathered, the investigators concluded that Ryan was sitting at the table when Hriana opened fire. They knew this because of the blood found on the table. However, the fact that several items on the dining room table were not disturbed raised doubts about Hriana's story. If there had been a fight, the items would have been disturbed. The crime scene investigators thoroughly searched Ryan's apartment, gathering every detail. At the same time, police officers questioned Ryan's neighbors to see if they had any information that could help the case. One of Ryan's neighbors, a woman named Nikki, spoke to the detective and provided some useful insights. Nikki knew Hriana well and thought that Hriana was more committed to Ryan than he was to her. According to Nikki, the couple often had loud, angry arguments that disturbed the neighborhood. Nikki remembered a specific incident several months ago when Hriana came to her door in tears, saying she was afraid of Ryan. Hriana had told Nikki that she and Ryan had a violent fight, during which he lifted her up and threw her down the hallway, causing her injuries. Nikki believed Hriana and encouraged her to report the abuse to the police, but Hriana decided not to take legal action. At the police station, detectives took Hriana to an interrogation room to question her about the shooting of her boyfriend, Ryan. Before starting the interview, the officers read Hriana her Miranda rights, reminding her that she had the right to have an attorney present. Hriana chose to exercise this right and asked for a lawyer to be present. While waiting in the interrogation room, Hriana filled out some paperwork under the supervision of a detective. Despite having asked for a lawyer, Hriana still chatted with the detective. When asked who the victim was, Hriana calmly replied that it was the man she had killed. This response showed a clear lack of emotion, as it was obvious she knew the victim was Ryan, her long-term boyfriend. Hriana remained in the interrogation room with the detectives, maintaining that she had acted in self-defense. She recounted the events of the previous night, describing how Ryan had allegedly grabbed her by the throat and violently thrown her around the apartment. At some point during the investigation, the detective temporarily left the room, replaced by another officer. Hriana began to reveal more details about her encounter with Ryan to this new officer. She alleged that Ryan had been extremely aggressive prior to the shooting, hurling insults at her, calling her crazy, and taunting her while brandishing a gun. Hriana believed that Ryan's behavior that night was fueled by drug use, which contributed to his violent outbursts. Throughout the interview, Hriana consistently stuck to her version of the events that culminated in the shooting. She claimed that Ryan was sitting at the dining room table, handling ammunition for his Sig Sauer pistol, when she noticed him staring aggressively at her from across the table. At that moment, she became aware of his intentions and realized he was trying to evict her from his condo. Hriana confessed to picking up the gun and firing it in the midst of the chaos, hitting Ryan with a single bullet. Hriana continued to describe the incident, claiming that after shooting Ryan once, she saw him twitching. Believing it was necessary to end his suffering, she fired multiple shots, ultimately killing him. In her confession, Hriana told the detective that Ryan was vain and had mentioned wanting a nose job, so she decided to grant him his wish. She deliberately aimed her gun at his face and pulled the trigger, essentially giving him the rhinoplasty he had requested. During the intense interrogation, Hriana expressed deep concerns about the impact of the incident on her academic performance and her future romantic relationships. She confided in the detective that having a dead boyfriend would make it difficult for her to find someone to marry, especially if they discovered she had killed him in self-defense. Despite her statement, the detective arrested and charged her with Ryan's murder. Hriana seemed genuinely surprised by her arrest, maintaining that she had acted in self-defense. In 2015, Hriana's trial began, and the courtroom was filled with anticipation. The prosecutor compared Hriana to Jodi Arias, who had also been charged with murdering her boyfriend, Travis Alexander, emphasizing the striking similarities between the two cases. This heightened the tension in the courtroom as everyone awaited the outcome. The prosecutor argued that Hriana was fixated on her ex-boyfriend, Ryan. According to the prosecution, Ryan dominated Hriana's thoughts, and she constantly discussed him. During the trial, the prosecutor presented testimony from Ryan's friends, who described his plans to end the relationship with Hriana and his efforts to avoid her phone calls and messages. Despite this, Hriana continued to visit Ryan's condo in Highland Heights uninvited, including on the night of the murder. The prosecution introduced evidence that Ryan had scheduled a date with Audrey Bolt, a former Miss Ohio, on the night of the murder. This information supported the prosecution's theory that Hriana was driven by jealousy and anger towards Ryan's potential new love interest. Audrey Bolt testified that she was supposed to meet Ryan for drinks at a bar on the night of the murder, but he failed to appear. It wasn't until later that she learned of his murder. The prosecution also presented evidence that Ryan had repeatedly expressed his desire to end the relationship with Hriana in the days leading up to his death. Ryan had sought advice from his father, Jay, on how to handle the situation, and Jay had counseled him to be kind to Hriana to avoid a messy breakup. However, it appears that Hriana continued to exert control over Ryan on the day he was killed. The prosecution presented evidence of several text exchanges between Ryan and Hriana, in which Ryan clearly told her he did not want to see her that weekend because he had other commitments. Nevertheless, Hriana showed up uninvited at his condo, which was not unusual for her. The argument that ensued reached a boiling point when Ryan explicitly told Hriana their relationship was over and she could no longer control him. Prosecutors argued that this statement enraged Hriana, prompting her to pick up a gun and fatally shoot Ryan. During Hriana's trial for murdering Ryan, the prosecution showed a video of her being questioned by the police to suggest she was a cold-blooded killer. In the video, Hriana's calm behavior and responses seemed to back up the idea that she had intentionally taken Ryan's life. The footage showed her dancing and singing along to music, which seemed unusual for someone who had just killed their loved one in self-defense. Normally, people in such a situation would be distraught and crying due to the loss of life and the weight of their actions. The prosecution's goal in showing the video was to make Hriana appear detached and unemotional, implying that her actions were not those of someone who had acted in self-defense. They claimed that her lack of tears and carefree behavior proved her guilt. However, this interpretation was open to debate and up to the jury to decide. In the end, the video was a key piece of evidence in the prosecution's case against Hriana, but it was just one part of the evidence presented during the trial. Hriana's defense team stuck to a clear storyline throughout her trial, arguing that Ryan was the aggressive and violent one on the night of the incident, leading Hriana to shoot him. To back up this claim, they built a picture of Ryan's mental state, suggesting that a mix of drugs he was taking, including anti-anxiety medications and amphetamines, contributed significantly to his behavior. The defense team presented the jury with autopsy results showing the presence of these drugs in Ryan's system, strengthening their argument that the drugs influenced his actions. An expert toxicologist testified for Hriana, stating that a combination of drugs like anti-anxiety medications and amphetamines could cause someone to become violent and paranoid. This testimony aimed to provide a reasonable explanation for Hriana's actions, implying that she may not have intended to harm Ryan. During Hriana's trial in April 2015, the prosecution grew increasingly worried that she might be acquitted due to being a smart, young, and attractive woman, and that her self-defense claim might persuade the jury. However, on April 23rd, the jury delivered a guilty verdict, convicting Hriana of murdering her boyfriend, Ryan Poston. At the August 2015 sentencing hearing, Hriana persisted in shifting the blame for Ryan's death onto him, which infuriated his friends and family. Despite the overwhelming evidence presented during the trial, Hriana stuck to her claim of innocence and refused to acknowledge her role in the events. Under Kentucky law, a defendant who is deemed a victim of domestic violence can be eligible for early parole after serving just 20% of their sentence. However, the judge in this case ruled that Hriana did not meet the criteria, characterizing her crime as a premeditated murder. As a result, the judge handed down a 40-year prison sentence, making Hriana eligible for parole in 17 years, when she will be 41 years old in 2032. Hriana Hubers was sentenced, but she appealed for a new trial, which was granted by a judge in August 2016. The reason for the appeal was that one of the jurors had failed to disclose their felony conviction, which is against Kentucky law since felons are not allowed to serve on juries. Following a 4-month delay, Hriana's second trial for the murder of Ryan Poston began in August 2018. During the opening arguments, Hriana's defense attorney claimed that throughout her year-and-a-half-long relationship with Ryan, Hriana tried her best to make him happy. However, their romance suffered because of it. The attorney stated that on the very first night Hriana and Ryan met, he was violent toward her, both physically and sexually. This incident had a lasting effect on her, and it took her several weeks to respond to his messages after that. Hriana's defense lawyers claimed that her high school experience of sexual assault led to a history of alcohol abuse and promiscuity. They argued that this traumatic event contributed to her behavior on the night of the murder. The defense team aimed to create a sympathetic image of Hriana, highlighting her troubled past and arguing that she was not responsible for her actions on the night of the murder. They sought to challenge the prosecution's narrative, suggesting that her behavior was the result of a combination of factors, including a history of abuse and a toxic relationship with Ryan. The defense portrayed Hriana as a victim of domestic violence at Ryan's hands, rather than as a cold-blooded murderer. They claimed that her actions were driven not by a desire for revenge or financial gain, but by years of abuse by her former partner. According to the defense, Ryan constantly criticized Hriana about her weight and chest size, pressuring her to enlarge her breasts. This constant pressure contributed to her low self-esteem and feelings of inadequacy, the defense argued. The defense claimed that Ryan and Hriana's sexual relationship was troubled, marked by frequent disagreements and frustration from both parties. According to the defense, Ryan yearned for a more romantic and intimate connection, but this desire was not fulfilled, leading to a growing rift between them. To support this claim, the defense presented evidence that Hriana had sought an injection to improve her romantic life, which was meant to address the couple's sexual difficulties and strengthen their bond. However, the defense argued that Ryan's consistent rejection and disinterest worsened the strain on their relationship, causing Hriana to become increasingly frustrated and isolated. Moreover, the defense alleged that Ryan often broke up with Hriana, only to engage in conversations with other women. In contrast, the prosecution stated that while Ryan Poston was not a perfect boyfriend, he was not abusive. They argued that Hriana did not act in self-defense when she fatally shot Ryan, but rather because he had ended their relationship that night. The prosecution claimed that it was time for Ryan to break up with Hriana, as she refused to leave him alone despite the breakup, demonstrating her inability to move on from the relationship. One of Ryan's co-workers testified that the breakup between Ryan and Hriana would be permanent this time because Ryan had always avoided breaking up with Hriana in person. According to the co-worker, Hriana had made every effort to keep Ryan. The prosecution presented text messages in which Hriana told her friends that she and Ryan's romantic encounters had brought them closer together. However, Hriana testified that these encounters had actually driven them apart. In another text message exchange, Hriana asked Ryan for sex, but Ryan was taking antidepressants, which had reduced his sex drive due to the medication's side effects. However, when Hriana testified, she claimed that Ryan had forced her into sexual intercourse. After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Hriana guilty of murdering Ryan despite contradictory testimonies and conflicting evidence. During the sentencing hearing, Hriana's mother emotionally addressed the judge, sharing stories of her daughter's singing talent, which had earned her multiple college scholarships. Through tears, she begged the jury to consider granting Hriana parole, arguing that her daughter still had the potential to positively impact people's lives. The mother acknowledged, however, that her pleas did not minimize the grief and pain experienced by Ryan Poston's family. Hriana was given a life sentence with no chance of parole. As part of her sentence, she must serve at least 17 years before becoming eligible for parole in 2032. She is currently serving her sentence at the Kentucky Correctional Institute for Women in Pewee Valley, Kentucky. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lisa Harnum. Lisa Cecilia Harnum was born on June 12, 1981, in the Toronto suburbs of Canada as the second child in her family. She was raised alongside her older brother Jason, with whom she has always been very close. Their single mother, Joanna, brought them up independently. Since their father left the family when they were very young and played no further role in their lives, Lisa and her brother had no memories of him. From an early age, Lisa grew up to be an active and purposeful girl. She participated in sports with her brother, attended martial arts classes, and enjoyed playing soccer and volleyball. However, her true passion was ballet, which she practiced at the dance studio for several hours daily. As a tall and slender child, Lisa's professional ballet training required a strict diet, which unfortunately had a detrimental effect on her growing body. During adolescence, Lisa developed anorexia as a result of her eating disorders. For a long time, she kept her problem hidden, believing she could overcome it alone. However, when her weight dropped to critically low levels, her mother intervened and had Lisa hospitalized for several months to recover and gain weight. After graduating, she pursued dancing classes and decided to enter the beauty industry. Alongside her university studies, she worked as a perfumer at a large cosmetics chain store, and in her free time, studied makeup and hairdressing techniques. When she turned 24, Lisa moved to Australia in 2005, driven by a desire for drastic change. She wanted to escape to a warmer climate and explore the world. On a one-year work visa, Lisa traveled to another continent. Her mother, Joanna, accompanied her for the first few months to ensure a smooth transition. Once satisfied that her daughter was settled, Joanna returned to Toronto, confident that Lisa could take care of herself. Lisa settled in Sydney, renting a cozy apartment, and soon landed a job at a small local cosmetology company. Once her visa expired, she made the decision to make Australia her permanent home. To achieve this, she first extended her stay for another year, and then began preparing the necessary documents required to obtain Australian citizenship. Lisa faced challenges in her personal life, partly due to her preference for older men, possibly stemming from her absent father figure. In 2006, she started a romance with a coworker nearly twice her age at Sydney Cosmetics. They moved in together, and her family approved. They traveled extensively, but eventually broke up a year after their engagement, with the age difference likely a factor. In 2010, Lisa graduated from the Sydney College of Stylists and landed a job as a hairdresser at a popular beauty salon, where she swiftly earned the respect of her colleagues and the trust of her clients. Around the same time, she started dating a new boyfriend, but their romance was short-lived after Lisa discovered he was married. Refusing to get involved in destroying someone else's family, she ended the relationship promptly. Before that, at a party, her boyfriend had introduced her to his friend, Simon Gitney, a businessman. This chance encounter would ultimately prove disastrous for Lisa. Born in December 1973 in Maryland, Simon Gitney came from a large, religious family of Lebanese immigrants. Raised alongside 5 siblings in a strict, obedient household, Simon struggled to control his emotions and anger from a young age. He was possessive, intolerant of rejection, and prone to violent outbursts, which eventually led to serious legal troubles. At 18, Simon Gitney was first incarcerated for harassing his ex-girlfriend at her workplace. The store owner intervened, but Simon returned with friends, assaulted the owner, and was subsequently arrested. Due to good behavior, he only served a few months before being released on bail. 3 years later, Simon was arrested again, this time for theft. He resisted arrest, engaged in a violent struggle, and bit off a policeman's earlobe. Although he faced a severe prison sentence, the pastor of the Lebanese Christian church, which his family belonged to, intervened on his behalf. As a result, Simon served only a year and a half in prison. In 2000, Simon was arrested for drugs. He served 2 years of a 4-year sentence. After his release, Simon transformed his life. He co-founded a luxury shoe business, invested in real estate and a premium car, and hid his criminal past from others. Simon and Lisa exchanged numbers at a party and started chatting. When Lisa complained about her living situation, Simon offered her a free room in his apartment while she looked for a new place. Despite her mom's concerns, Lisa moved in, thinking Simon might be gay due to his appearance and piercings. They lived separately for months, but grew closer over time, and a romance blossomed. Simon, 37, and Lisa, 28, were a couple. To Lisa, Simon seemed like a charming prince from a fairy tale. He was outgoing, cheerful, and lavished his love with gifts and surprises. They went everywhere together, including the elite sports club, which Simon had been attending for years. Lisa thought she had found her soulmate and would live happily ever after with him. She couldn't stop talking about him to her mom, brother, and friends, unaware that their fairy tale was about to come to an end. Simon's behavior changed 6 months in, but Lisa didn't notice. He distanced her from friends and family, erased her boundaries, and tried to control her views and tastes. He convinced her to quit her job at a beauty salon where she was happy by throwing a scene and forcing her resignation. A month and a half after that, the couple relocated to a luxurious 15th-floor apartment in an elite residential complex. Unbeknownst to Lisa, the apartment was heavily equipped with hidden surveillance cameras. Simon gifted Lisa an expensive smartphone and laptop, pre-installed with spyware that enabled him to monitor her messages, emails, and calls, as well as track her every move. He also gained access to her social media accounts, giving him the power to delete friends, posts, and photos at will. Katani's control over Lisa's life intensified daily, but he cleverly made it seem as though Lisa was voluntarily complying with his demands. He had invaded every aspect of her life, eliminating any semblance of privacy. Katani dictated Lisa's appearance, forbidding her from wearing makeup, claiming it made her look tacky, and instead bought her dull gray and black clothing, discarding her old outfits as too revealing. He restricted her movements, only allowing her to leave the apartment accompanied by him and solely visiting places of his choice. He even banned her from going to the gym, instead purchasing expensive exercise machines, citing that she could now work out from home. Lisa's social media friend lists were shrinking daily, and Ghani finally convinced her to delete her accounts. With no friends left in real life, all her contacts and calls were closely monitored by Simon, who only allowed her to communicate with her mother and brother. During her last visit home in December 2010, Lisa decided to fly to Canada to spend Christmas with her family. Simon had planned to accompany her, but his urgent business matters prevented him from doing so. Despite initial reservations, he eventually agreed to let her travel alone, provided she adhered to his strict rules and conditions. When Lisa arrived, Jason and Joanna were astonished by the drastic changes they saw in her. She was a shadow of her former bright and cheerful self, now devoid of makeup, with her luxurious hair hidden under a headdress and dressed in unflattering all-black attire. However, it was the internal changes that were truly alarming. Lisa would flinch at every phone ring, instantly grabbing the receiver, as per Simon's instruction to answer calls immediately, regardless of the time or her activities. During her stay at her mother's house, Lisa refused to see friends and rarely ventured out. Joanna was shocked by her daughter Lisa's behavior and decided to talk to her. Lisa broke down, revealing that Simon controls her life, tracking her every move and restricting her freedom. He doesn't let her work, see friends, or pursue hobbies. Joanna was horrified, urging Lisa to stay in Canada, but Lisa insisted she loved Simon and believed he'd eventually calm down. Despite her family's pleas to stay, Lisa decided to move back to Australia to be with Simon, disregarding their warnings that the relationship was unhealthy. She reassured her mother that everything would be fine, saying Simon loved her and wouldn't harm her. However, after her return, the situation deteriorated significantly. Simon restricted her from leaving the apartment, and when they went out together, he demanded that she keep her eyes fixed on her feet, avoiding eye contact with other men. Moreover, he started calling her Cecilia, her second name, as he believed it was more respectable. In the spring of 2011, Lisa started complaining about pain in her leg, an old injury from her youth when she took ballet classes. Instead of taking her to the hospital, Ghani hired a female physical therapist to give Lisa massages 3 times a week at their home. The therapist soon became Lisa's closest friend and confidant, and Lisa openly shared her concerns about her difficult situation with her. On June 12th, Simon organized a birthday party for Lisa at the most expensive restaurant in Sydney, but the guest list only included his relatives and close friends. Lisa wasn't allowed to invite anyone she wanted, making it an isolating celebration. At the end of the evening, Simon proposed to Lisa by putting a ring on her finger. She accepted, but her tears were not of happiness. Instead, they were tears of desperation and hopelessness, noticeable to everyone present. Back home, Lisa called her mother and tearfully shared the news of her engagement. However, her mother, Joanna, was not pleased with the announcement. She tried to convince Lisa to end the relationship and return to Canada as soon as possible. Lisa asked her mother to avoid discussing this over the phone, as she had already realized that her fiancé, Simon, was eavesdropping on their conversations. Lisa attempted to focus on the upcoming wedding and started making plans. When she tried to discuss the details with Simon, he curtly dismissed her, informing her that he would select the venue, choose her dress, and create the guest list. Lisa felt utterly powerless, having no say in the matter. During a subsequent physiotherapy session, Lisa confessed that she couldn't continue like this, but felt trapped because Simon refused to let her go. The physiotherapist and Lisa devised a plan. At each session, Lisa would secretly pass some of her belongings to the therapist for safekeeping, all while ensuring Simon remained unaware of her actions. On July 28th, Simon rushed out of the house, leaving his laptop behind, which was unusual for him since he always carried it with him. Lisa seized the opportunity to investigate, and her worst suspicions were confirmed. She discovered a spyware program on the laptop, which Simon had used to obtain all her phone data and recordings of her conversations with her mother. Even more disturbingly, she found surveillance footage from the security cameras installed in every room of their apartment. On the same day, Lisa used her physical therapist's phone to call her mother and begged her to take the next available flight to come and rescue her from the apartment. However, Joanna couldn't drop everything immediately. She needed time to arrange a shift swap with a colleague. In hindsight, Joanna would always regret this delay. Back home, Simon quickly realized that his fiancée had discovered the spyware on his laptop. Lisa broke down in tears, trying to understand why Simon would do such a thing, but he justified his actions by claiming they were for her own good. On July 29th, an intense conversation took place between the young couple, a recording of which would later be presented in court. Lisa was overcome with emotion and asked to leave, but Simon remained calm and assured her that this would never happen, suggesting that she was suffering from mental health issues. On the morning of July 30th, 2011, Lisa woke up early, got dressed, and gathered her important documents and belongings in her purse. She locked herself in the bathroom and made a final phone call to her mother, warning her that if anything bad happened to her, it would be Simon's fault. It seemed Lisa was attempting to sneak out of the apartment while Simon slept, but unfortunately she was unsuccessful. What happened next is unclear, but according to neighbors, they heard a scream in the hallway. However, before they could react, the noise abruptly stopped, and exactly a minute later, a young woman fell to her death from the 15th floor balcony. Passers-by on the street also heard the scream and saw the body falling from a great height, but they didn't have time to understand what was happening. A man walking his dog that morning, who was closest to the scene, heard a noise and looked up. He saw a man holding something large, which he then threw down. When people arrived at the scene, they found a young woman lying on the ground, but despite their efforts, they couldn't help her. She died instantly, having suffered severe injuries. 3 minutes later, Ghani, still in his pajamas, ran out into the street, crying and saying he didn't know how he was going to live without his fiancée, claiming he hadn't caught her in time. At first, it seemed like an accident, but Ghani quickly claimed that his fiancée had intentionally ended her life. A note found in his pocket and a disturbing video suggested that something strange was going on. After the body was taken to the morgue and examined, a torn note was found in different pockets with the message, "There are cameras everywhere in the apartment." It's likely Lisa was afraid Simon would discover the note, so she ripped it into small pieces and scattered them among her pockets. An investigation revealed that indeed, multiple cameras were installed in the apartment, but the hard drive containing the recordings was nowhere to be found. Simon claimed that there were no video recordings at all. However, a surveillance camera in the communal hallway caught a disturbing scene. The short footage shows Lisa fleeing the apartment and calling for help, but Simon grabs her from behind, covers her mouth, and drags her back inside. This incident occurred just a minute before she fell off the balcony, and it was the scream that the neighbors heard. Ghani's laptop contained a recording of a conversation between Ghani and Lisa from the night before the tragedy, as well as spyware that Simon used to monitor his fiancée's activities. Simon claimed that he and Lisa had an argument that morning, during which she became hysterical and ran out into the hallway, screaming. He said he managed to bring her back inside because he didn't want to attract the attention of their neighbors. According to Simon, he then tried to call Lisa's mother, but she ran out to the balcony and jumped to her death just as he was doing so. Simon admitted that Lisa had previously threatened to take her own life, but he hadn't taken her warning seriously. Meanwhile, Ghani attributed the spyware on his laptop to Simon's supposed concern for Lisa's safety. During the trial, Simon was accompanied by Rachel Louise, a 22-year-old model who bore a striking resemblance to his late fiancé. However, it was later alleged that Rachel Louise was only using Simon to gain fame and attention, and that she willingly spoke to the press and appeared on TV to declare that Simon was incapable of harming a woman. Simon's lawyers attempted to persuade the court that Lisa was unstable, prone to outbursts, and potentially responsible for her own death, despite evidence of her long battle with anorexia and her treatment at a clinic. They also claimed that Simon, being shorter, would have been physically incapable of lifting Lisa, who was taller, or throwing her over the balcony. However, a gym trainer who regularly saw Simon testified that he was much stronger than he appeared and could easily have lifted Lisa, contradicting the defense's claims. This was further supported by the absence of Lisa's fingerprints on the railing and glass barrier, which suggested she could not have jumped without touching them. Additionally, the physiotherapist who had been confided in by Lisa and received her belongings in the hope of escaping her abusive relationship testified in court, providing crucial evidence. In the end, Ghani was found guilty of murdering his fiancée and sentenced to 26 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 18 years. After the verdict was announced, Rachel Louise became enraged and started insulting the judge, which led to her removal from the courtroom. Simon and his legal team attempted to appeal the court's decision, but all their efforts were unsuccessful, and the verdict stood. Following the verdict, Rachel ended her relationship with her boyfriend, citing in an interview that it was challenging to maintain a relationship while he was incarcerated, although she still believes he is innocent. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jasmine Richardson. In town, the Richardson family was renowned for being exemplary. Deborah and Mark, along with their children, 8-year-old Tyler and 12-year-old Jasmine, resided in a beautiful and cozy home. Like all Canadians, they were extremely hospitable and sociable. Their home frequently hosted guests, and the atmosphere was built on principles of love and respect. However, everything took a turn for the worse when their eldest daughter, Jasmine, entered puberty. The once calm girl underwent a drastic transformation. Firstly, her character changed. She became bold and frivolous. Conflicts between her and her parents began to arise, and her academic performance started to decline. Secondly, her preferences in music and clothing drastically changed. She shifted from enjoying modern pop to heavy rock. Bright colors and clothing were replaced by shades of gray and black, and her dressing style became provocative as she sought to appeal to boys, drawing attention to her curves. As a result, her interaction with former friends significantly decreased, and she began to spend more time alone in front of her computer screen. The door to her room was often closed, indicating a shift towards isolation. With the advent of the internet at home, she developed a fascination with Gothic themes, dark poetry, criminal psychology, and human anatomy. Miss Richardson even went so far as to identify as a witch, embracing the Wiccan religion. To explore these interests, she frequented various websites where she found a community of like-minded individuals who shared her passions. Her social media profile greeted visitors with the phrase, "Welcome to my tragic world." At first glance, it seemed like a typical teenage angst, marked by an excessive flair for drama and mysticism. However, she became increasingly withdrawn from her family. On her profile, she had listed a false name and claimed to be 15, as she preferred interacting with older individuals. Her parents attempted to be supportive during this challenging period, suggesting they spend quality time together and find common interests. However, she found these suggestions dull. Jasmine considered her younger brother a nuisance and gradually stopped communicating with him. Yet she could spend hours on end at the computer conversing with strangers. Deborah and Mark recognized that their daughter's current state was a phase. She would mature and gain wisdom. As a result, they were quite permissive of her new interests. One day, Jasmine informed them that she wanted to attend a punk rock band concert. Her parents agreed, unaware of the consequences this outing would have. In early 2006, Jasmine Richardson went to a local youth band concert, following her own pursuits. She knew Jeremy Steinke, he who had been captivating her heart for months, would be there, as he was also drawn to Gothic culture. They had met on a vampire enthusiast's website where they occasionally exchanged messages. Jeremy presented himself as a 30-year-old werewolf craving blood, and to prove it, he wore a vial of blood around his neck, though it was unclear whether the fluid was human or animal in origin. Nonetheless, he clearly considered himself extraordinary, which Jasmine found extremely appealing. After meeting at a concert, the young people's affection for each other continued to grow. Eventually, Stinka worked up the courage to ask her out, and to his delight, she happily agreed. Everything seemed perfect, but there was a major obstacle. Jeremy was 23 years old. The couple was well aware that her parents would not approve of their relationship due to their significant age difference, so they decided to keep it a secret. Furthermore, Jeremy's troubled past would only make matters worse in her parents' eyes. Jeremy grew up in poverty, living with his mother and sister in a trailer. He had a troubled relationship with his mother, who drank excessively and had a string of volatile partners. These partners would often beat him when they were drunk. As a result, by the time he was 13, Jeremy was struggling in school and had developed a fragile mental state. Feeling overwhelmed, Jeremy once attempted to take his own life by hanging himself. Fortunately, he was stopped in time. Afterwards, doctors diagnosed him with depression and hyperactivity. At school, he was bullied, and eventually, he stopped attending classes altogether. As he got older, Jeremy became fascinated with the idea of being immortal and started visiting websites that focused on dark themes. His online profile was filled with topics like pain, self-harm, and bloody violence. Few people knew about Jeremy's secret relationship, except for his close friends, who found it unusual and disturbing. The couple managed to keep their communication private until the Richardsons started monitoring their daughter's excessive internet use. Deborah and Mark were alarmed when they discovered their daughter Jasmine had been chatting with strangers online, which is a concern for any parent. They immediately took away her computer to protect her. What they found out next was even more disturbing. Jasmine had become infatuated with an adult man who seemed to have questionable motives, known by the ominous nickname Soul Eater. This made her relationship with Jeremy officially off limits. Deborah and Mark sought the help of a psychologist to free their daughter from this harmful relationship. They believed that therapy would also improve their relationship with Jasmine. Fortunately, it worked, and Jasmine appeared to be getting back to a normal life, assuring them that the ordeal was behind her. As a sign of trust, they gave her computer back. Unfortunately, this decision would ultimately seal their fate. Saturday, April 22, 2006, Mrs. Richardson was preparing for bed when she heard a noise in the basement. At first, she thought it was just rats, but as she went downstairs and turned on the light, she saw a person wearing a ski mask standing opposite her, staring at her. Startled, Mrs. Richardson let out a loud scream. The stranger rushed towards her, trying to cover her mouth, but she struggled and screamed even louder. Frustrated, he stepped back, pulled out a knife, and stabbed her repeatedly in the chest. Hearing his wife's screams, Mark rushed downstairs, grabbing a screwdriver he had left on the floor earlier that day while fixing an outlet. When he entered the basement, he was met with a horrific scene. His wife lying in a pool of blood, with the attacker standing next to her. Mark immediately attacked the intruder, but was stabbed in the stomach. As the pain subsided and his eyes began to close, Mark quietly asked why. The attacker replied that it was because his daughter had wished it. Meanwhile, upstairs, Tyler was the only one left. He sat frozen on his bed in his pajamas, too scared to move. He heard the footsteps getting closer and closer until the bedroom door creaked open. Jasmine was thrilled that her parents believed she was remorseful, which allowed them to communicate again. She emailed Jeremy as soon as she got internet, telling him that it started with her parents gone and ended with them together. During therapy, a dark plan formed and solidified over time. Stinka found it tempting but insisted on creativity and attention to detail. The couple knew they couldn't be together while the Richardsons were alive. Later, Jasmine's friends remembered how frequently she talked about her parents, specifically how much she was annoyed by them. As a result, they believed she wanted to kill them. However, no one took Jasmine's words seriously. On Saturday, April 22, 2006, Garrett went to his friend Tyler's house across the street. He wanted to play, and the weather was nice despite being quite chilly, as it was still spring that year. When Garrett approached the house, he noticed the blinds were still closed, and no one answered his knock on the door. This was unusual, as the Richardsons' car was parked in the driveway. Hoping to see someone, the curious child peeked into the living room window but saw no one. Then, Garrett decided to walk around to the back of the house, where he often played with Tyler in the basement. Peeking through the window, he saw something strange and disturbing on the floor, what appeared to be two people lying in a pool of blood. He informed his mother, who was initially skeptical. However, she decided to investigate the family across the street. Together, they approached the house, and Garrett pointed out the window he had looked through earlier. The woman was horrified by what she saw and immediately called emergency services, reporting that something was amiss at the Richardsons, as they appeared to be lying on the basement floor, covered in blood. The police responded quickly, breaking down the front door and descending to the basement, where Garrett and his mother had witnessed the scene. Upon entering the dark basement, the officers struggled to identify the bodies on the ground, which were severely mutilated and bloodied. However, it soon became clear that it was Mark and Deborah Richardson, and they had tragically lost their lives. The area was covered in blood, with splatters on the floor, walls, and even the ceiling, a gruesome scene that defied description. Later, the police conducted a thorough search of the house and discovered a small child in the upstairs children's room. The child was lying in bed surrounded by toys, with visible knife wounds and a deeply cut throat. The scene was gruesome, with blood splattered everywhere. The incident was unprecedented in Medicine Hat, with one officer later stating that it would take decades to erase the memory of what they had seen that day. After searching the house, the police discovered that one family member was missing, Jasmine, the Richardsons' eldest daughter. Since the attack seemed to have happened in the basement and her room, while the rest of the house was untouched and nothing was stolen, officers feared for her safety. The state of the bodies suggested the crime occurred the night before, with the perpetrator breaking in and attacking Jasmine's parents. But what had become of Jasmine, and where was she now? The police developed various theories, hoping that by chance, the girl might be safe somewhere outside the home, or that the perpetrator had kidnapped her and was holding her captive. They also considered the possibility of a ransom demand from relatives in the future. However, as time went by, they found no clear answers. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that the Richardson family were truly wonderful people, faithful spouses and loving parents. They didn't deserve to have anyone wish death upon them. However, officers discovered that their eldest daughter had been causing trouble lately. This new information led to a shift in the tone of media announcements, and the investigation began to focus on locating a person of interest, 17-year-old Jasmine Richardson, who was referred to as JR in accordance with Canadian law, which protects the identities of minors. Jasmine and Jeremy Stank were identified as the wanted couple. Police questioned friends and acquaintances, thinking they might be hiding with them, but this lead was a dead end. However, it revealed that the pair attended a party just hours after the crime, where Jasmine seemed unaffected, drinking and making a disturbing joke about carving up her parents, which the guests laughed off as a dark humor. A comic strip found in Jasmine's school locker further confirmed her involvement in the crime, as it detailed how she would deal with her family members alongside her boyfriend as her accomplice. Photos of the suspects were widely circulated, and it was only a matter of time before someone came forward with information about their whereabouts. Soon, a tip arrived, and the couple was spotted in the community of Leader, Saskatchewan, about 130 kilometers from Medicine Hat. Caught off guard, Jasmine Richardson and Jeremy Stank were found sleeping peacefully in a pickup truck and offered no resistance as they were taken to the police station. Jasmine was questioned first. She said she loved Stinka, and he felt the same, but their age and social differences were a problem. She claimed the Richardsons wouldn't have approved of their relationship. Jeremy, she said, killed her parents to be with her. When asked if she was involved, Jasmine denied it, saying she was out when it happened and only learned about it later. She accepted it because she loved Jeremy and ran away with him. Detectives struggled to crack the suspects, so they used a clever tactic. They planted an informant in Jeremy's cell who got him to spill details contradicting Jasmine's alibi. Jeremy confessed the murder plot was Jasmine's idea, and he only agreed after they took away her computer. He revealed he killed Deborah and Mark, while Jasmine killed her brother, and even begged him to kill Tyler too. After confessing, Miss Richardson was confronted with the recording and admitted to stabbing her brother out of mercy. She conceived the plan, confirmed by thousands of messages. Jasmine supported Jeremy's dark tastes, feeling alienated from society. Fearing loss, he helped realize the idea. He desired violent revenge, inspired by natural-born killers. With sufficient evidence, the suspects were charged with 3 counts of homicide. The detectives constructed a clear picture of the crime by piecing together the confessions of the accused, witness testimony, and other case evidence. Prior to the crime, Jeremy was intoxicated. Jasmine led him into the house and led him to the basement, where he attacked her mother, Deborah. Deborah was the first to die, suffering 12 stab wounds across her body, with the deepest wound piercing her chest and reaching 12 centimeters deep, ultimately striking her heart. Enraged, Jeremy continued his brutal assault on Mark, inflicting 24 wounds, 9 of which were in the back. Like his wife, the family patriarch bled out on the basement floor. Tyler Richardson, Jasmine's younger brother, was the last to die. While Jeremy was dealing with the parents downstairs, Jasmine inflicted 5 stab wounds on Tyler upstairs. After Jeremy finished with the parents, he went upstairs to assist his girlfriend with the child, callously slashing Tyler's throat as if carving a pumpkin. After washing off the blood at home, Jeremy met Jasmine at a predetermined restaurant where they discussed the night's events. From there, they attended a party. Casey Lancaster, a friend of Jeremy's, helped them eliminate evidence and escape to Saskatchewan. The atrocities they committed are almost indescribable. The couple embarked on their killing spree with an unnerving sense of calm, as if driven by some supernatural force. It's astonishing that, during interrogations and their time in custody, they showed no signs of remorse or regret for their actions. While in detention, they exchanged letters, referring to themselves as legends and immortals. In one letter, Jeremy proposed to Jasmine, who happily accepted. However, their crazed love suddenly began to deteriorate, much like last year's snow. During the trial, they abruptly shifted the blame onto each other. In June 2007, Jasmine Richardson became the first of the 2 to face trial. She entered a not guilty plea, arguing that she was in a trance-like state, unable to intervene while Jeremy killed her family members. Additionally, she claimed that she only inflicted injuries on her younger brother, and it was Jeremy who dealt the fatal blow. Jasmine maintained that her discussions with Jeremy about killing her parents were purely theoretical, but they resonated with him so strongly that he coerced her into turning them into reality. Despite being convicted of 3 counts of homicide, Jasmine Richardson received a 10-year prison sentence, thanks to Canada's juvenile criminal justice law, which stipulates that individuals under 14 cannot be imprisoned for more than 10 years. The sentence prioritized rehabilitating and restoring Jasmine's mental state over punishing her. In 2008, Jeremy Steinke's trial began. He claimed that he never initially intended to kill his girlfriend's parents. However, when discovered in the basement, he felt compelled to attack. Jeremy alleged that he did not harm Tyler, implying that Jasmine was responsible, while he merely observed from the doorway. The defense claimed that Jasmine had deliberately seduced Jeremy, hoping he would rescue her from her parents' strict control. Friends testified that Jeremy had confided in them about his plan, saying he was desperate to keep Jasmine and would do anything to prevent losing her. The lawyers also requested that the charges be downgraded to manslaughter, arguing that Jeremy was under the influence of drugs at the time of the incident. During questioning by the prosecution, Jeremy's inconsistencies were exposed when he was asked why he had committed the crime. He responded, "When you find your soulmate, you'll do whatever it takes for them." Throughout the trial, Jeremy remained unemotional, but he broke down in tears when his mother, Jacqueline May, took the stand in his defense. She acknowledged feeling guilty about her role in his upbringing, which had been marked by physical abuse, beatings, and rejection by her partners. Jeremy was convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder and received 3 life sentences. He will not be eligible for parole until at least 25 years later, in 2033. The charge of being an accessory to the crime against Casey Lancaster was dropped in a Medicine Hat court. Casey Lancaster was found guilty of obstructing justice, sentenced to 1 year of house arrest, and ordered to abstain from drugs and alcohol. Jeremy Stank renamed himself Jackson May while in custody. Jasmine Richardson received a 10-year sentence, including 4 years in a psychiatric facility, where she was diagnosed with conduct and oppositional defiant disorders. Later, under community supervision, she showed genuine remorse. Released in 2016, Richardson now lives in Canada under an assumed name, sparking debate about her second chance. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Carmen Thomas. Carmen Thomas was born on October 30th, 1987, in South Africa. Her life took a drastic turn when her father passed away when she was just 10 years old. Overwhelmed by grief, her family moved to live with relatives in Whitby, United Kingdom. However, the move did not bring the peace they had hoped for, and they eventually returned to South Africa. When Carmen turned 18, she decided to leave behind with her relatives and later relocated to London to pursue her education. She earned a master's degree in marketing and quickly became known for her charismatic and outgoing personality. Carmen formed strong bonds with many people and became a loyal friend and companion. However, living in a big city like London came with its expenses, and Carmen had to work hard to maintain a decent standard of living. By day, she worked as a marketer in a store, and by night, she worked part-time at a gentleman's club. Although her career choices may have raised eyebrows, Carmen was a woman of principle and never compromised her values. She conducted herself with dignity and earned the respect of her clients. It was during her time at the club that she met Brad Callahan, a charming and flamboyant man. Brad was born in April 1978 in New Zealand to parents who separated when he was just 9 years old. He stayed with his mother and later moved to Australia. Brad graduated from university in 2001 with a degree in construction engineering. He was then offered a job as a chief structural engineer for a large business complex in the UK by a prominent construction company. To navigate the complex's high-stakes negotiations and enhance his professional status, Brad sought the services of a gentleman's agency, where he met Carmen. She was intelligent, tall, and beautiful, with striking dark eyes and black hair. However, Brad's demanding career and ambitious nature left him little time for a serious relationship. Despite this, Brad and Carmen got along well after a dinner, and their casual interactions eventually blossomed into a solid friendship. Over time, their friendship deepened into a romance, and they began living together. Their relationship was built on mutual trust, care, and support. When Carmen got pregnant, Brad decided it would be better to go back to New Zealand, a country with cleaner air and a more laid-back lifestyle. In March 2005, they returned to Auckland. After the birth of their son Jack, they experienced immense happiness. They prioritized Jack's safety and well-being, making sure he had everything he needed for a happy childhood. However, the arrival of their son brought significant challenges to their relationship. The first problems arose in the relationship between Carmen and Brad due to disagreements on how to raise their child, causing tension and instability. After 3 years, they decided to go their separate ways, but shared joint custody of their son, Jack. The breakup was challenging for both, but they made a genuine effort to maintain a positive relationship for Jack's sake. Carmen and Jack eventually moved in with Colin, Carmen's half-brother, who also lived in Oakland. With time, Carmen regained her emotional balance and started a new life without Brad. In 2008, she and her son relocated to a house on a street near Brad's, so Jack could be close to his father. Having lost her own father at a young age, Carmen wanted to ensure Jack always had a father figure in his life. Despite her decision to live near Brad, Carmen's friends and family believed she and Brad still had a good friendship, but in reality, they only spent time together when it was related to Jack. As time passed, life continued for Carmen. After parting ways, Carmen and Brad each attempted to move on. Brad resumed his career as a construction engineer and, in May 2009, began a new relationship, which ultimately led to an engagement. Meanwhile, Carmen devoted herself to raising their son and, much to Brad's dismay, returned to her work at a gentleman's club. This choice troubled Brad. Carmen repeatedly presented Brad with ultimatums, but he dismissed her requests, focusing on his impending marriage and plans for fatherhood once again. This marked the beginning of adjustments to his financial commitments, specifically affecting the alimony payments for the maintenance of their son, Jack, which Brad made in accordance with their agreement. However, Carmen viewed the financial constraints as a catalyst in an escalating series of conflicts. Tensions escalated until March 19, 2010, when a domestic violence incident occurred. Police responded to a neighbor's call about a dispute and mediated the situation. As a result, Carmen received a formal warning from law enforcement. On June 29, 2010, Brad visited Carmen's house to discuss a new school for Jack and to sign a written agreement for child support. However, Carmen was unhappy with the document and asked Brad to leave, yelling that Jack was not his son as he departed. 2 weeks later, Brad tried to contact Carmen again, but she did not respond. On July 13, 2010, Brad reported Carmen missing to the police, who began searching for her. Through video footage and interviews with neighbors, investigators were able to reconstruct a timeline of events leading up to Carmen's disappearance. They discovered that on June 29, a surveillance camera at a nearby supermarket had captured footage of Carmen, providing a potential lead in the search. During their investigation of the rented house where Carmen and Jack lived, police noticed that there was no outdoor garbage can. Inside the house, they found bloodstains on the front door, washing machine, sink, and shower. To confirm the presence of blood, forensic scientists used luminol, a substance that reacts with the iron in hemoglobin. The test revealed multiple patterns of blood on the bathroom door and floor. The landlord reported that on June 29, she heard loud screaming, followed by prolonged crying and moaning. When she knocked on Carmen's door, no one answered. She looked out the window and saw a street trash can and an overturned drying rack, which caught her attention. She called her husband, but before he arrived, Brad walked out of the house, carrying soiled clothes. He told the landlord that Carmen had become ill after a medical procedure and had vomited blood. However, the landlord noticed that Brad appeared to have just taken a shower. She had no reason to doubt his story, so she didn't call the police. The search for Carmen continued, and her cell phone activity caught the police's attention. Although messages were being sent from her phone regularly, the tone and language used were unusual and didn't match her previous communication style. The outgoing messages and calls continued until July 10th. During further investigation, Carmen's car was found, and in the back seat, they discovered her luggage, clothes, and other personal belongings. The police investigation into Carmen's disappearance began with the examination of her seized suitcase, which revealed traces of blood and a note indicating she owed money to her employer. An envelope with Misty's name and $270 was also found in the glove compartment. Inspector Mark Benefield suspected foul play after finding blood in the car and launched a search for Carmen's body in the countryside southeast of Auckland, but it was inconclusive. As the investigation continued, police analyzed Carmen's and Brad's phones, discovering they had been in close proximity to each other during the search. However, Carmen's phone was not connected to a cell tower in Hamilton. A crucial piece of evidence was a missing trash can, which had disappeared from its usual spot near the house on the day Carmen vanished. A neighbor reported seeing the can being taken away through her window. Police suspected the trash can might have been used to dispose of evidence. When EE examined Brad's phone records and bank card details, then they found that on June 30th, Brad had purchased a meat cleaver, a large plastic container, and several garbage bags, which raised suspicions. By studying Brad's daily routine, police identified some unusual events, including a day when he arrived early at the construction site and walked alone around the property for an extended period. While it was not unusual for a supervisor to be on site early, the police found it noteworthy. After gathering evidence, including Carmen's cell phone and suspicious purchases, they began to suspect Brad of murder. They believed Brad had killed his former lover, Carmen Thomas, by hitting her multiple times in the head and then carefully hiding her body. On September 21st, Brad was arrested and charged with Carmen's murder and attempting to obstruct justice. Brad's second son was born while he was in custody, causing him to become emotional and resentful. 9 days after his arrest, Brad broke down and revealed to investigators the location of Carmen's body. It turned out that Brad had attempted to create an alibi by making it seem like Carmen had left for Hamilton and never returned. However, under questioning, he eventually detailed the events of the day Carmen was killed, revealing that his plan had not been as perfect as he thought. Brad admitted that Carmen and Brad had a heated argument, which ended with Carmen telling Brad that Jack was not his son. In a fit of rage, Carmen kicked Brad out of the house. However, he returned 5 minutes later, grabbed a baseball bat, and brutally attacked Carmen, striking her in the head with such force that she fell unconscious, bleeding profusely. Despite realizing the gravity of his actions, Brad continued to assault Carmen, throwing several punches. Memories of happier times flashed before his eyes, but his anger and resentment consumed him. Brad knew his life would never be the same after this moment, and he could never undo the damage. Nevertheless, he felt a twisted sense of satisfaction, believing that he had solved his problem and ensured that Jack was now his alone. Brad regained his composure, took a shower, and quietly left Carmen's house. In the following days, he devised a plan to dispose of Carmen's body and cover up the crime. He met his friend outside a supermarket and asked him to buy black garbage bags, kerosene, and cleaning products, hoping to avoid raising suspicion. Brad then returned to the apartment, meticulously cleaned up the bloodstains, wrapped Carmen's body in a bag, and disposed of it in a trash can. After killing Carmen, Brad dismembered her body into 8 pieces to make it easier to dispose of. He cut off her legs at the hip joints and then cut each leg in half at the knee. He also severed her arms and head from her torso. A few days later, on July 3rd, Brad met a friend at a boat ramp in Okahu Bay, near downtown Oakland. He confessed to his friend that he had killed Carmen during an argument and asked for help disposing of her body. However, his friend refused to provide a boat to dump the remains into the sea. Over the next few days, Brad drove to Ware Ridge in West Auckland and buried the dismembered body parts in a shallow grave. On July 7, he drove Carmen's car to Hamilton and abandoned it in a hotel parking lot. He left a suitcase of clothes and some of her personal belongings in the car to make it seem like she had left voluntarily. However, he made a critical mistake by including bloody clothes in the suitcase. In an attempt to cover his tracks, Brad started sending text messages from Carmen's cell phone to her friends, pretending to be her. He claimed that she was not feeling well and had been in bad shape for days. However, this plan ultimately backfired on him. On October 1st, police excavated the burial site indicated by Brad and found the body of Carmen Thomas. Her remains were discovered in plastic containers, carefully removed from a makeshift grave on Wayfair Ridge. An autopsy revealed that Carmen Thomas had died from multiple blows to the head, with the fatal blow causing a compressed skull fracture. After multiple forensic examinations, Carmen's body was released to her family on October 13th. Tragically, her young son Jack, who had been waiting and hoping to see his mother again, was only able to hug and kiss her white casket. On February 8, 2011, Brad Callahan's first court hearing was held. Judge Winning determined that the crime was unintentional and took into account Brad's claim that he acted impulsively in a state of rage. However, the judge was more severe in his assessment of the subsequent cover-up. On May 26, 2011, Brad Callahan was charged with attempting to change the course of justice. A retrial was held on November 25, 2011, where police officers filled the High Court in Auckland. In a surprise move, Brad Callahan made 2 guilty pleas, admitting to murder and attempting to change the course of justice after Carmen's death. A judge has sentenced 31-year-old Brad Callahan to life in prison for murdering Carmen Thomas. Brad was also given a 6-year sentence for attempting to interfere with the investigation into Thomas's death. The judge considered this one of the most serious cases of attempted interference with justice, describing Brad's actions as extremely serious. During the trial at Auckland High Court, the judge criticized the brutality of Thomas's murder, but decided not to impose the harshest possible sentence. The courtroom was filled with Thomas's friends and family, including her parents who had traveled from South Africa. Judge Venin condemned Brad's attempts to cover up his crime, which involved considerable effort and deception. The 6-year sentence for interfering with the investigation will be served at the same time as the life sentence. In a statement, the Thomas family expressed their ongoing anger and grief, saying that no punishment can bring their daughter back. However, they are relieved that Brad will be in prison for a long time, giving him the opportunity to reflect on the harm he has caused. Little boy Jack Brad is living with his grandmother in another town under an assumed name.